I died an ordinary man on earth and woke as Goan, a slave-born servant at the very bottom of the Taehan sect. They set me to picking herbs, while the sect's geniuses flew on swords far above me. Then I found the one gift that was mine. I could seize the lifespan of any living thing and pour those stolen years straight into my cultivation, buying my way from trash to the nascent soul realm while no one watched. The weakest herb picker alive was quietly farming immortality. If you're enjoying this so far, drop a like and hit subscribe. It honestly keeps these videos going. But how did I get here? Let me rewind to where it all began. The mountain wind slid down through the valley while I stood in the garden, and even under a sun that had bleached the whole sky white, it carried a thin thread of coolness to me. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and kept my eyes fixed on the flowers blooming at my feet. Every bloom stood bright and untroubled by the heat, and I studied them the way a starving man studies a full table. 2 other youths stood to my left and right. The 3 of us had joined the Medicine Valley that morning, the lowest branch of the Alchemy Hall under the Taehan sect. Where I was quietly thrilled to be there, the other 2 only wiped at their sweat and looked bored. In front of us stood a plain-clothed young man, ordinary in the face but sturdy, with bright and steady eyes. He was Jang Chunshu, the eldest disciple of the Medicine Valley, and he was walking us through the basics of harvesting spiritual herbs. Jang Chunshu told us the plants in this plot were all rank 1 herbs. He said we were never to pull them up by the roots. We were to cut them near the soil, then wrap the stems at once in the spirit-protecting paper so the spiritual chi would not bleed away. His voice stayed loud and clear the whole time, full of energy, as if the sun had no hold on him at all. I held the scissors in one hand and the strips of white paper in the other, and I fixed every word he said into my memory. The 2 beside me had endured nothing to stand here. I had endured a great deal. People back home had thought me a slacker sliding into ruin, but none of them understood that this quiet corner was the one road to strength that actually suited me. When Jang Chunshu told us to each cut 1 flower for inspection, I crouched down first. I set the paper aside and pinched the stem of the red flower gently between my fingers. The wealthy youth on my right, Mang Rang, told me not to be so nervous. A wrong cut on a mere rank 1 herb meant nothing, he said, and back home he would not have spared these mortal weeds a glance. He wore fine clothes and carried himself like someone born to an unusual house. He was not wrong about his own standing. Apart from me, the servant, the other 2 came from wealthy families, though even wealthy children had to rely on their spiritual roots to enter the world of cultivation. All 3 of us carried the most ordinary 5-element spiritual root, which meant the Taehan sect would only take us as utility disciples. I ignored Mang Rang and focused on the flower. I pinched the stem, gave a soft snip, wrapped the base in the protecting paper, then stood and handed it over. Jang Chunshu turned it in his hands, smiled and told me I was meticulous. I did not answer him. My eyes had already locked onto the red flower, and my heart was beating harder now than it had before the cut. After a few breaths, a single line of text surfaced in the air, the kind only I could ever see. It told me I had seized 1 year of lifespan from the red spirit flower. Relief loosened my chest, and a smile came without my asking for it, so it held true. Only flora and fauna with spiritual chi in them would surrender their lifespan to me. The first time it had happened, I was 10 years old. I stumbled into a flower pot another servant was carrying and spilled a spiritual bloom across the ground. I drank 12 years of lifespan out of it before I understood what I had done. The head of the guards had wanted my hand for that. It was the 3rd young miss, Ji Xiaowu, who had stepped in and saved me. She was the reason I stood here now. Ji Xiaowu carried a rare dual spiritual root, the sort that surfaces once in a century, and every major sect had come courting the Ji clan for her. When she brought 5 of the clan into the Taehan sect, I came along as one of her 2 servants. Without her, an ordinary 5 elements root like mine would have landed me in some 3rd-rate sect at best. While I was still savoring the moment, Mang Rang and the other youth, a boy named Li Ya, finished their own cuts. Jang Chunshu tucked the 3 flowers into the storage pouch at his waist and told us the day's task in a stern voice. We were to gather 50 red spirit flowers between us, work only in this garden, cross into no other, and bring the harvest to the pavilion when we were done. Then he turned and left. The moment his back was turned, Mang Rang shook a fist after him and muttered that the man could talk half a day about nothing, that he must never have mentored a junior brother before. Li Ya just dropped onto the dirt and mopped his sweat with his sleeves. Once Jang Chunshu had climbed the stairs and gone, I turned to the 2 of them and made my offer. I told them their fine clothes made it plain they came from good families and were not built for rough work. I was different, I said. Only a servant, so they should let me finish the whole task while they rested somewhere cool. All I asked was that they look out for me later on. Mang Rang's eyes lit up, and he called me a sensible fellow, promising me a lifetime of food and clothing if I ever lost my place here. Li Ya had no strength left to speak and only nodded. The 2 of them set down their protecting paper, leaned on each other, and shuffled off toward the shade. I gathered up the papers they left, looked back over the garden, and felt the sun on my face grow cool beside the heat in my eyes. To them, these were flowers. To me, the whole bed of them was a staircase to heaven, laid down stone by stone along my road to a long life. So I worked, and I worked carefully. It was not enough to finish the task. I had to do it well because I could not afford to lose a post this perfect. Off in the shade, Mang Rang and Li Ya wiped at their sweat and watched me with dull eyes. Two wrung out to talk. Time crawled by. I was soaked through, but the grin never left my face. After a while, Mang Rang sighed that the strange kid was truly hardworking, and that they ought to keep me fed and shielded so I would go on doing their chores. Li Ya rolled his eyes and asked who exactly would dare bully me in a valley this empty, and whether Mang Rang would talk back if the senior brother did the bullying. Mang Rang coughed to cover himself and asked which Li family Li Ya came from. Li Ya answered calmly that his people were the Li family of Changnak, in Changju. That made Mang Rang's eyes go wide, because Changnak was the imperial city, and it meant Li Ya shared his surname with the ruling house. Li Ya offered nothing more. He only looked over at me, quiet, and Mang Rang grew uneasy at the thought of meeting a member of the royal family in a place like this. Then he seemed to talk himself calm again. The Taehan sect was the foremost sect of the whole Taechang dynasty, he reasoned, grand enough to share a character with the imperial name. A stray royal at the bottom of it was not so strange after all. A long while later, I finished the 50 flowers. I packed the wrapped blooms into a bamboo basket, slung it onto my back, and looked out across the other gardens with real hunger. There were more than 15 plots in the valley, and the little corner we worked was surely the poorest of them. The richer herbs would be growing elsewhere. There was plenty of time, though, and I had no wish to show off my gift, so I stopped there for the day. I started down the path toward the pavilion and waved the other two over. Mang Rang came trotting up, all smiles, thanking me for my hard work, and offering to carry the basket. We had traded names in front of the Valley Master when we arrived, so the courtesy came easily to him. I saw straight through his little scheme and handed the basket over anyway, while Li Ya curled his lip in open disdain. I did not care. I only wanted to keep this post. Performing too well might get me reassigned somewhere worse, so arguing with Mang Rang over a basket was not worth the breath. The three of us reached the pavilion and found Jiang Chunchu with a book in his hands. He set it down when he saw us, told us to leave the flowers, and passed each of us one of the basic manuals the old master had left behind. He urged us to practice hard in our rest hours, and to strive one day to leap out of this valley and become true disciples of the sect. 5 years back, he said, one disciple here had received a spirit pill from the master, broken into Foundation establishment, and risen to the outer sect. As he spoke, he waved a hand, and 3 secret manuals drifted out of his sleeves toward us. Mine reads Springwood art on the cover, which sounded about as low as a technique could get. I was not disappointed. I was at the very bottom of the Taehan sect, and I knew it. Jiang Chunchu gave us a few more instructions and sent us to claim rooms in the courtyard kept for utility disciples. There were only 4 of us in the whole Medicine Valley just then, and with the Valley Master away for another 2 years, Jiang Chunchu ran the place on his own. Sometime later, I lay on my wooden bed, chest heaving, my face still red from the long hours in the sun. I called my status up with a thought, and the lines of text unfolded before my eyes. My name sat at the top. Below it, my lifespan showed 15 years lived against a ceiling of 151. My spiritual root read as an ordinary 5 elements root. My cultivation as unranked. My one technique as an unmastered fire control art. Each line carried the same note, that I could pour lifespan into it to make it grow. I had seized 88 years of lifespan in a single day. Before this, my whole span had been 63 years, 12 of them stolen from that broken flower pot when I was 10, which had left me only 50 to begin with. A rank 1 herb gave up 1 or 2 years at most, yet to a mortal even 1 year is a long precious thing. The longer I stared at the panel, the wider my grin stretched. In one short stretch of work, I had earned 88 years, and the job felt like a gift dropped straight into my lap. I wanted nothing more than to become a permanent fixture of this valley. An outer sect place, an inner sect place, none of it tempted me. People said becoming a proper disciple meant going out on missions, hunting demons, and cutting down devils in the mortal world. And all of that sounded lethal. I had never so much as killed a chicken. In my life before this one, I had been an ordinary man on Earth, and if someone put a fight in front of me, I would fail it. Staying here in the Medicine Valley suited me perfectly. I would almost never meet real danger, and I could keep farming lifespan without end. Whoever decided that cultivation had to be a gamble with death had never held a job like mine. I sank into pleasant daydreams and could not pull myself back out. The night passed. I woke early, washed in a hurry, and went to find Jiang Chunchu for my next task. He was not asleep, but sitting in quiet chi cultivation, and my diligence pleased him. He rose, walked to the door, and pointed out a garden. The heart-calming grass there was ready to harvest, he told me, and I should simply leave the cuttings at his door afterward without bothering to knock. Strips of spirit-protecting paper drifted from his sleeve into my hands. Then he looked at me a moment, hesitated, and softened into a kindly smile, telling me to work hard, that a diligent man willing to eat bitterness would surely make it in the end. Spring left and autumn came, and a full year turned over in the Medicine Valley without anyone marking its passing. The loft door opened one morning, and I stepped out with Mang Rang and Li Ya, all three of us bowing back toward the room, before Mang Rang pulled the door shut. We let out a shared breath and went down the stairs. The moment we reached our own courtyard, Mang Rang started grumbling. The senior brother could stretch an hour of talk out of the smallest matter, he said, and might as well just hand over the records of 100 herbs he was always holding. Li Ya only shook his head and went to the corner of the yard, pulled his sword out of the ground, and began to drill. His spiritual root was as plain as ours, but he came from the imperial line, and he carried a set of exquisite sword forms he meant to use to change his fate. In the Taechang dynasty, the Tao of cultivation was revered above all. Every official, civil, or military practiced it, and the empire sorted the common people of its 13 provinces into ranks, from slave at the bottom up through commoner and official to immortal at the crown. Merchants counted as commoners, and only those of immortal status were true nobles. An ordinary official could hold a post in some town, while commandery lords and provincial governors all held immortal status. That said nothing of the imperial city of Chengnak, which no one could even enter without it. Many noble houses of immortal status quietly exiled their weak-rooted children to keep their bloodlines clean, and the royal family was no exception. So however shabby Li Ya looked, his immortal status put him far out of my reach, because I stood at the very bottom, a slave. Through that whole year I made a point of harvesting Li Ya's and Mang Rang's herbs for them. Most of the work fell in summer, or the early morning, and my sweat bought me their goodwill. The rest of the chores, the planting and watering and fertilizing, I left to them. They never quite dared ask me to take those on, not with Jiang Chunchu watching from the loft while they worked. So I listened to Mang Rang chatter and watched Li Ya move through his forms. Every man carries some dream of being a swordsman. A year of living side by side had built a real ease among us. Li Ya let me watch him practice, since he could hardly hide it anyway, and the Li family forms hid their true power in secret methods of inner chi that mere copying could never steal. When Mang Rang finally ran out of words, he clapped my shoulder and asked why a boy who never trained his own skills cared so much about swordplay. I told him plainly that my aptitude was poor, that I was too lazy to train, and that I watched Li Ya only out of boredom, since life in the valley was dull. Mang Rang agreed it was dull, then launched into a long lament about the 4 maidservants who used to entertain him back home. I was used to his bragging and let it run. Dusk had fallen by the time Li Ya finished. He stabbed his sword into the yard, wiped his sweat, and said he was going for a walk in the small woods, then left without waiting for either of us to answer. Once he was gone, Mang Rang leaned in and whispered, wondering aloud what the boy was always doing out there. I shrugged and said I had no idea, that a royal was entitled to his secrets, and that maybe one day he would go home and turn into a prince. Mang Rang scoffed at the thought, since Li Ya had been shipped out here as a laborer. I only asked why, if the world held more than the Taehan sect, a true prince would come to a place like this to serve as a utility disciple. That left him stunned and silent. I walked to the well, drew a ladle of water, drank it down, set the ladle back, and went out through the gate. Mang Rang did not follow. He knew where I was headed, muttered something to himself, and went back into train. I made my way to the plot of heart-calming grass, a second-grade spiritual plant. All year I had cut nothing but first-grade herbs, and even those came slowly, since the plants here took years to mature. Jiang Chunchu had said the heart-calming grass would be ready in another month. Our first taste of second-grade herbs, and I had been waiting on it a long time. To my eyes, those deep blue stalks were not grass at all, but numbers. Years of lifespan swaying in the wind. Then one of the stalks jerked where no wind touched it. My expression changed on the instant, and I vaulted the wooden fence and rushed over. A palm-sized white-furred rat was digging at the soil beneath the grass, working to uproot it, and the moment it saw me coming, it bolted like a loosed arrow and vanished under the far fence. I wanted to chase, but the heart-calming grass had already been bitten through. Its stem snapped, so I dropped to my knees and pulled a strip of protecting paper from my waist. My left hand plucked the grass while my right wound the paper around its base to hold the spiritual chi in. When I stood, the text told me I had seized 4 years of lifespan from the heart-calming grass. Before I could even smile, a second line rose after it. My lifespan had crossed 1,000 years for the first time, and a new function had opened to me, a lifespan probe. Curious, I looked down at another stalk of the grass and thought the words, check lifespan. The answer came at once, giving the grass an age of 4 years, a lifespan of 25, and a ceiling of 102. So a humble stalk of heart-calming grass could hold a limit of 102 years. The lifespan I stole ran lower than the target's own, which told me I could not strip a creature clean, that most of its years scattered away at the moment of death. I did not yet grasp the difference between lifespan and its ceiling, though I guessed it tied back somehow to cultivation. I gathered the wrapped grass, rose, and started for Jiang Chunchu's loft. Every herb in the valley went to Jiang Chunchu for safekeeping. Twice a year, the three of us drew our stipends as utility disciples, spirit stones and spirit pills to cultivate with, and he handed out herb seeds according to how well we had done. I already kept 3 stalks of heart-common grass growing in my room, one more than the others, and neither of them begrudged me the extra. Just as I left the plot, I saw someone climbing the loft stairs, an old man in black with a book box on his back and a black cloth cap, mysterious in his bearing. From a distance I probed his lifespan, and 2 lines answered me at once. His name was Zhang Hyundan, and he stood at the 8th level of the Qi refining realm. He was 104 years old, with a lifespan of 120 against a ceiling of 180. Zhang Hyundan, the master of the Medicine Valley, and my own master in name, though I had only ever heard Jiang Chunchu speak of him as a man forever traveling abroad. This was our first meeting. At 104, with his span capped at 180, he had perhaps 16 years left barring some accident. The probe was a fascinating thing. It read a person's cultivation and aptitude at a glance, and I began to suspect the ceiling itself measured the height of one's talent, though I would need many more readings to be sure. Zhang Hyundan stepped into Jiang Chunchu's room and shut the door. I set my wrapped grass on the long table in the courtyard and turned to go. Back in my own yard, I looked in on Mang Rang, who sat cultivating inside. The probe gave him the 2nd level of the Qi refining realm, 17 years old, a lifespan of 90, a ceiling of 190. A loser, just as I had guessed. I did not linger to chat and soon returned to my room. I waited until night, and when I heard Li Ya's footsteps, I rose and stepped out. He was about to enter his own room when he saw my door open and asked what I wanted. I probed him as I answered that the master had returned, and suggested we go pay our respects together the next day. The reading stopped my breath in my chest. Li Ya stood at the 6th level of the Qi refining realm, 18 years old, with a lifespan ceiling of 1,550 years. Was that the talent of an imperial descendant? He was supposed to carry only a mixed spiritual root like the rest of us, and yet the numbers said otherwise. My whole view of him shifted in that instant. Perhaps he was a buried genius who would one day blaze up for the world to see, and the 6th level of Qi refining at 18 only proved it. He had been playing the fool to catch the tiger off its guard, hiding his real strength behind a mediocre mask. The realms I knew ran upward from Qi refining to foundation establishment, then core formation, nascent soul, and soul transformation. Each great realm split again into 9 minor levels. If Li Ya sat at the 6th level of Qi refining already, he would break into foundation establishment within a few years, and become a formal disciple of the sect. I resolved on the spot to build a good bond with a talent like this. When I said as much aloud, in my roundabout way, he raised an eyebrow, nodded, called me thoughtful, and told me to knock for him when I woke. Then he turned into his room. I watched his door close, full of quiet feeling. Every world has its classes, it seemed, and the gulf between his station and mine would make true friendship hard. I was not angry. A servant since childhood, I had swallowed more cold looks than I could count, and I did not blame Li Ya, not when I wore such a plain and forgettable face. It hardly mattered. With a gift that stole lifespan itself, I felt sure I would reach immortal ascension one day. Until then, I only had to keep my head down and pass safely through the long, dull work of piling up years. No conflicts, no trouble. The lower my profile, the better. I smiled to myself and closed the door. The moon that night hung round and full, and its light poured across the stone steps of the courtyard like still water. At dawn, we stood together in the main hall, the 3 of us side by side, while Zhang Hyundan sat with a cup of hot tea and Jiang Chunchu waited beside him, all deference. I probed the senior brother out of habit. He stood at the 5th level of Qi refining, 54 years old, span of 110, ceiling of 175, a poor aptitude for a man his age. It made sense though. The sect held more than one valley like this, and a talent like Li Ya turning up at all was the rare thing. Beside these 3, the old me had been the sorriest loser of the lot. Zhang Hyundan lifted his cloudy eyes to us and said our senior brother had told him how we fared. As our master meeting us for the first time, he owed us a greeting gift. We could choose one item among 3, he said. The records of 100 herbs, the Qi nourishing art, or a spell called poisonous woodvine. Only one each, and we were never to teach them to one another, or the punishment would be severe. Mang Rang jumped in first and asked for the poisonous wood vine. I assumed no one would want the dry herb records, so I meant to let Li Ya pick ahead of me as a small favor. Then Li Ya said he would take the records of 100 herbs, and I turned to stare at him. Brother, I thought, you are not following the script at all. Mang Rang and Jang Chunshu were just as surprised by the choice, though neither said a word. Zhang Hyongdan looked at Li Ya with plain approval, nodded, and praised him for having a good eye and a patient hand. He passed a palm over the table beside him. 3 secret manuals appeared there, and at his glance Jang Chunshu began handing them out. From first to last I never got a chance to speak. Fine, I thought. I had been passed over. It was not in my nature to sulk. I only told the old man silently that he might be cold to me today, but in 16 years, when his time ran out, I would set our grievances aside and burn a stick of incense for him. I took the manual stamped Qi Nourishing Art and wore a look of delight I did not feel. Then Zheng Hyundan warned us that demons had slipped into the Taehyun sect of late. The Medicine Valley sat at the sect's very edge, he said, and though disciples patrolled, danger remained, so we were not to step beyond the valley in our daily lives. With that he waved us out, and we bowed and withdrew, myself at the rear, pulling the door shut behind me. What I did not hear until later, through the wall, was the rest of it. The old man told Jiang Chunshu that the boy Li Ya was no simple thing, that he surely cultivated some art to mask his level. His spirit ran no weaker than the senior brother's own, he said, and Li Ya should be watched closely and handled gently, being of royal blood. Jiang Chunshu agreed, then offered that I was the most diligent and the weakest in aptitude, and would likely remain in the valley longest of all. The master simply told him to guide me well, and handed me over to his care. Jiang Chunshu bowed his thanks with a smile. On the way back, Mang Rang would not stop talking about demons, more excited than afraid. Then Li Ya stopped, looked at me and said the Qi Nourishing Art was actually a fine thing, that it could hide one's aura and lengthen one's life. Since he already held a technique of his own, he added, it suited a man like me far better than it would him. I thanked him warmly, calling him Brother Li. I would likely spend my whole life in this valley, I said, so the herb records held little meaning for me when I could learn plants simply by trailing the senior brother. He nodded, pleased that I took advice so readily, and we soon parted for our rooms. The daily work in the valley was light, which left us long hours to cultivate. I sat on my bed and paged through the Qi Nourishing Art. On its own, the thing had not interested me at all, but Li Ya's words about hiding one's aura and stretching one's lifespan had changed my mind, and I wanted to try it, and more than that, to test my evolution gift on it. All year I had dabbled at the Springwood art and gotten nowhere, so I had dropped it after half a month. I would rather read herb lore and travel accounts in the Valley Library than grind at a technique for nothing. Days slid by. Beyond the daily herb inspections, I spent my time cultivating in my room. After 15 days, I managed to make the words Qi Nourishing Art surface on my panel, still marked as not yet mastered. I stared at that line nervous, since this was my first time spending lifespan to evolve a skill, and I had no idea how many years it would swallow. My span had crossed 1,000, yet losing dozens or hundreds of years would still hurt. I fixed on the technique and chose, in silence, to pour lifespan into it. The panel asked how much I wished to invest. I named 1 year, and 2 lines answered. I had spent 1 year of lifespan cultivating the Qi Nourishing Art, and because my comprehension and aptitude were both poor, my cultivation had not advanced at all, though my spirit and vigor had improved. A brief comfort washed through me and left just as fast. That was it? The word poor stung me twice over. It felt like open bullying. I began to wonder whether this so-called aptitude tied back to my spiritual root, so I turned the evolution on the root instead, and poured in a full 100 years at once. The lines told me I had spent 100 years opening my senses to heaven and earth, deepening my root's feel for nature. My ordinary 5 elements root had risen to a better 5 elements root. I felt cheated. Watching my lifespan fall from 4 digits down to 3 made my heart ache, and I understood then that evolving a spiritual root was a bottomless pit. Still, the itch would not leave me. I had earned 1,000 years in a single year of harvesting, I told myself. So if I spent a little more today, I could simply work harder to earn it back. I would indulge myself just this once. Since it was my first time using the gift, I drew a deep breath and quietly fed 500 years into the Qi Nourishing Art. The lines came faster than I could read them. 1 year passed with no progress but improving spirit. 10 years passed, and though my talent still held me back, I mastered the art and strengthened my blood and Qi. 100 years passed and gave me true insight, and the technique began to shift under me. 200 years, and it merged with the spiritual Qi of heaven and earth into a genuine method of cultivation. 300 years, and it rose into a spirit-nourishing art. 400 years, and in a sudden epiphany I gathered the deep meaning of heaven and earth, and forged from it the dragon-elephant energy-nourishing art, my body and blood transforming with it. 500 years, and that art reached major achievement, broke past its own ceiling, and became the Dragon Force primordial art, my very physique changing in kind. The prompts kept flowering before my eyes, and before I could finish them, a great flood of memory poured into my mind. A breeze came through the window, stirring the curtain and my black hair, and with my eyes shut, I breathed in and out on instinct, a faint dragon's hum rising in my throat. I do not know how long I sat there. When I finally woke, the light beyond the window had gone dim, and the mountain forest stood dark. I had already inherited the whole cultivation memory of the Dragon Force primordial art, mastered it outright, without a single day of true practice. The art had been built by studying the cultivation of a dragon turtle. It could hide a man's aura, mask his level, and forge in him the raw strength of a dragon. The chi-nourishing art, I understood now, was only a broken fragment of its foundation, and my evolution gift had deduced the whole from the piece. I suspected the complete art had always existed in the world, and that the Taehan sect had merely salvaged a scrap of it and called that scrap the chi-nourishing art. If I fed it another 300 years, I wondered, what would it become? I forced the urge back down and felt out my new physique instead. A domineering strength moved through my body, a sense of power without any edge to it, and I felt that a single punch could shatter a whole pavilion. It was a wonderful feeling. My senses had sharpened too. I could hear Meng Rang and Li Ya breathing in their rooms, and further off, the low voices of Zhang Chunchu and Zhang Hyundan. The demon had already killed 13 disciples. The senior brother was saying, most of them utility disciples from the various medicine valleys. With only the 2 of them, he feared they might not be able to protect us. The master answered that it was fine, that he had already filed a sect mission, and that a foundation establishment disciple would be sent to guard the valley. Zhang Chunchu called that a great relief, and admitted the spiritual chi in the valley had felt wrong that afternoon, that he had feared the demon was coming and had not dared leave his house. The old man chided him with rough affection, saying the boy had grown up at his side, never gone out to temper himself, so of course his nature ran timid. Cold sweat ran down my back as I listened. I had been careless. From now on, I could not deduce a technique so recklessly, and I thanked my luck that Zhang Chunchu's cultivation was low enough to miss what I had done. I eavesdropped a while longer, and once I was sure they were not speaking of me, I let my heart settle. Then I felt out my new body again. Following the method of the Dragon Force primordial art, I pressed my aura down to its faintest point and sealed my blood and chi inside me. I looked exactly as weak and harmless as before. An hour later, I opened my eyes and called up the panel. My lifespan now read 16 years lived against 402. My root stood at the better 5 elements grade, and my cultivation was still unranked. My techniques listed the unmastered fire control art, the unmastered spring wood art, and the Dragon Force primordial art at major achievement. Major achievement, and I had never trained a day for it. The only pity was that the Dragon Force art cultivated the body alone and raised no spiritual power, so my cultivation stayed unranked. Even so, I felt I could sweep through the whole chi-refining realm without trouble. After that, I only had to wait for my lifespan to climb, since an art at major achievement fed my span on its own. However slowly, that night sleep would not come. I refreshed the panel again and again until dawn, and still watched my lifespan hold steady. I had to comfort myself that no technique, however strong, could add a full year in a single day. Heaven rewards the man who spends his life, I told myself. The surprises would come in time. I washed up and went out to walk the gardens and calm my mind. As luck had it, the moment I reached one plot, my eyes fell on the white-furred rat, the very one that had gnawed my grass before. I checked that no one else in the valley had left their rooms, then crept toward it. It sat with its back to me, 30 paces off, and never noticed me coming. When the gap closed to under 7 paces, I shot forward like an arrow off the string and snatched it up in one hand. The little thing was so frightened it threw both paws in the air like a creature surrendering. I laughed and told it that a thief who dared steal my life was finished, and as I gripped it, I watched it try far too slowly to turn its head toward me. By high noon, the 3 of us stood at a wooden fence, while Meng Rang stared, fascinated, at the white-furred rat in my hand. Li Ya studied it and said it was a white spirit rat, a creature drawn to heaven and earth treasures thick with spiritual chi. That hunger had earned its kind the name of treasure-hunting rats, he said, and it barely counted as a spirit beast at all. Meng Rang asked what set a spirit beast apart from a demon beast. Li Ya explained that demon beasts shaped themselves through their own cultivation, while spirit beasts were born able to sense the spiritual chi of the world. They could cultivate too, he said, and their aura never carried the bloody weight of demonic energy. In short, he said, a spirit beast was nowhere near as dangerous as a demon beast. Hearing that, I lost all wish to kill the rat. Meng Rang's interest only grew, and he asked, half laughing, whether I would just give the creature to him. I raised an eyebrow and cursed his nerve in silence. Li Ya said coldly that white spirit rats rarely lived alone, and that one usually meant a nest close by. Meng Rang could go catch his own, he added, rather than squabble over a single rat beneath a station. Meng Rang flushed with anger, huffed that he would do exactly that, and stalked off. Once he was well away, I thanked Li Ya. For all his cold manner, the man was easy to be near and generous underneath it. He had never stopped me from watching his sword forms, and today he had spoken up for me outright. If he had not, I would have been in real trouble. If I had beaten Mang Rang to tears, that loud fool would have raised a commotion loud enough to bring the whole valley running. Li Ya looked me over carefully and said softly that I seemed to have changed somehow, though he could not name what it was. Then his hand shot out and caught my wrist. To my eyes his motion was slow, but I did not dodge. I let him take the wrist and put on a startled face, asking what he was doing. He said it was nothing and let go, hesitating before he added that my aura was steady and my body sound, only wholly without spiritual power. However poor my talent, he said, I should not neglect to cultivate, since a man who works hard always keeps some hope. I nodded and eased into small talk with him. He was in good spirits and unusually willing to speak, and through him I came to understand the wider world of cultivation a little better. The children of the imperial family really were a breed apart, full of knowledge even without ever having traveled. Half the burning of an incense stick later, Mang Rang came hurrying back and whispered at my side that something big had happened. I looked toward the mouth of the valley. When Li Ya asked what it was, Mang Rang's eyes went wide. A cultivator now stood guard at the entrance. He said an intersect disciple who had taken the master's bounty and come to protect us for a month. He guessed the bounty had gone out because of the demons, and worried aloud that if this guard could not stop the thing, we were all dead meat. I could already make out the disciple from a distance. My new eyes gave me his face clearly. A young man in a long green robe, handsome and refined, plainly no common sort. The probe named him Chogyung Pung, first level of the Foundation establishment realm, 19 years old, a lifespan of 290, a ceiling of 870, 19 and already into Foundation establishment. A genius, and no wonder the inner sect had claimed him. The Taehan sect truly earned its name as the first sect of the dynasty, with prodigies scattered everywhere like weeds. Li Ya and Mang Rang fell to arguing about the demon. Mang Rang thought it absurd that a demon could sneak into a sect this strong and stay uncaught for half a month. Li Ya found it ordinary, since the sect was vast and the Medicine Valley sat far out on its rim. 100 years ago, he said in a low voice, a demonic cultivator had broken into the Taehan sect, murdered hundreds of disciples, and strolled away at his leisure. This demon might know some hidden art that made it just as hard to catch. No place in the whole world was truly safe, he went on. Given the fortune the Empire poured into its demon suppression matters every year. He talked on about the world while Mang Rang and I listened, rapt. I had grown up inside the G clan, a cultivating house, yet I had learned almost nothing of the world, and only now did I grasp how dangerous it really was. Demons everywhere, evil spirits running loose, 3 or 4 cultivators and 10 dying at their hands. The more I heard, the more afraid I became. I would never go out, I decided. I would stay inside the sect and pile up lifespan, keep my head low for 1,000 years or 10,000, right up until the Taehan sect itself closed its doors. When Mang Rang complained that a valley of precious herbs deserved more than a single guard, Li Ya shook his head. There were more than 50 valleys like ours, he said, and our herbs were not so rare. Deeper inside the sect stood far richer valleys where heaven and earth treasures grew, any one of which could change a mortal's fate. My eyes lit at that, and I pressed him about such a place, though he knew only that it existed and nothing more. We talked a while longer and then scattered to check our assigned plots before returning to our rooms. I tied the white spirit rat with a length of string so it could not flee, sat cross-legged on my bed with it in my lap, and began to cultivate. I worked only the Dragon Force primordial art now, since it raised both my strength and my span. I could not be bothered with the rest when a stockpile of lifespan would let me simply spend them into being later. When night came, the valley fell quieter than I had ever known it, and my sharpened senses caught Jung Hyundan speaking with Cho Gyung-pung hundreds of feet off. The old man was deeply respectful toward the young disciple, which told me Cho Gyung-pung was more than an ordinary intersect man. Through their words, I learned the demon's name, the greedy demon. Cho Gyung-pung spoke of it with easy contempt, and his confidence seemed to steady Jung Hyundan, whose racing heart I felt slow back toward calm. Greedy demon. My thoughts flickered. I wondered whether my Dragon Force could cut such a thing down, since the art's inherited memories claimed its power suppressed demons and drove off evil. Still, I had to plan for the worst, in case Cho Gyung-pung could not hold. However long my life ran, I had only the one, and I could not afford to gamble it. That night, everyone's aura in the valley wavered, shaken by their nerves, and catching it made me more anxious still. Not until dawn did I finally sleep. For 5 days, the greedy demon stayed away, and my tight-wound heart slowly loosened. On the 6th day, I came back to my room after dark as usual, this time with 4 travel accounts carried up from the library to widen my knowledge of the world. The white spirit rat scurried out from under the bed and hopped onto the table. Ever since it had felt the aura of my Dragon Force cultivation, it had grown attached to me, and even untied now it would not run. I sat at the table, teased the rat a moment, and opened a book called The Travels of the Azure Wanderer. The window hung half open, and a ghostly night breeze slipped in to make the lamp flame shiver and stretch the rat's shadow across the wood. The account was a diverting thing, though it leaned far too hard on romance. Its hero took in the scenery of the land, slew the odd demon, and fell into fleeting love affairs at every turn. Deep in the night, something began to feel wrong to me. Every woman the hero met adored him, while he played at reluctance and gave in with a great show of resistance, and I wondered privately whether some idle scholar had penned the whole thing. I disdained the author even as I read on, gripped in spite of myself. A cold wind gusted through the window then, and even I, with the dragon force in me, could not help a shiver. I set the book down and rose to shut it, but before I reached the sill, a commotion broke out in the distance and stopped me where I stood. Cho Gyung-pung's low shout carried to me, a cry to the prodigy to die, and it stood my hair on end. The greedy demon had come, yet he did not sound afraid at all. If anything, he sounded eager, sure of himself, and it steadied me for half a breath, right up until his scream tore through the dark. My heart lurched. I hurried to the window, shoved it closed, turned back, and blew out the lamp, then pressed myself into a corner of the room. The white spirit rat clearly sensed it too and leapt trembling into my arms, and the little beast's shaking only deepened my own fear. I had never once met a monster or an evil spirit in my life. The G-clan had been far too safe, and as a child the worst terrors I knew were the clan's own guards, scarred and glowering bruisers straight out of some old war tale. I tried to talk myself steady, telling Cho Gyung-pung to make good on his boasting. Through the wall, I told Li Ya that a man of his rare talent and strange destiny had to be the hero of some novel. He should cut the demon down, I thought, and rise like a dragon when his moment came. My fists were clenched hard, the dragon force already gathering in my body. Soon I heard the door beside mine push open. It was Li Ya, sword in hand, rushing out to back Cho Gyung-pung. Mang Rang did worse than I did and hid clean under his bed, which nearly dragged a curse out of me. The coward who always played the big brother had turned spineless the instant it counted. Every second stretched like torture. In my perception, Cho Gyung-pung's aura simply vanished, and I could not tell whether he had died. Then the demon called out for the prodigy to stop, and Li Ya's voice reached me and made me shudder. Was the thing going to eat us all? A heavy thud followed, and Li Ya's voice cut off. Was he finished too, so easily? My heart pounded like a war drum, and no amount of will could slow it. Zhang Hyandong and Zhang Chunchu had both shut themselves in their rooms, feigning deafness to a commotion this loud, and I thought grimly that the disciple truly took after the master. Silence fell outside, so complete that even my keen senses caught no movement, no aura, nothing of the greedy demon at all. The night lay dead still, quiet enough to hear a dropped pin. Leaning against the wall, I seethed at myself in secret, wondering why my heart would not stop hammering. For no reason I could name, though I heard nothing beyond the wall, I felt certain the greedy demon was drawing closer to my house. My gaze darted between the door and the window. The moonlight leaking through their cracks was terribly, impossibly bright. The rat shook so hard against my chest that I half wanted to fling it away, and could not bring myself to. Time dragged while I held my breath and gathered my mind. I had never longed for daylight the way I longed for it now. This sect was not safe at all, and afterward I would hoard far more lifespan, keeping my head down while my strength never once stopped climbing. As my thoughts wandered some unknowable stretch later, my eyes fixed on the threshold. The door stood on my left, less than a stride away, its sill lit by the moon, and a dark shape had appeared in the crack. My scalp prickled. The greedy demon was here. My heart leapt into my throat, and my whole body went rigid, and for one wild moment I wanted to bolt straight out. Then I froze in truth. A wet hand pressed down on my head, sharp nails biting into my forehead, and a shudder rolled through me. My mind went white. I looked up, cautious, and saw a pale arm reaching out of the darkness above me like a woman's, its palm on the crown of my skull, its nails hooked like claws. The owner leaned out of the black after it, a hideous face crowded with wild hair, and I could not make out her features, only the fangs dripping red. She was smiling. Fear drove me past thought. My arm swung out on its own in a rage and slapped the greedy demon across the face. The blow blasted the eaves of the house apart and splattered flesh across the room, and tiles and thatch flew dozens of feet into the air before the night swallowed them. The sky hung black, and the forests around the valley stood like masked ghosts. I gasped for air with my raised arm shaking, my palm slick with blood. The demon's blood sprayed across my face. Even after everything went still, I could not calm down. Moonlight poured in and lit the room, showing a great blood flower bloomed across the wall, ghastly and raw, and a severed pale arm lying at my feet. A dozen breaths later, I finally steadied. The text rose before me and told me I had seized 52 years of lifespan from the greedy demon, a rank 2 creature. I kept gasping, but my look turned strange as I read it. Just this. The whole thing struck me as absurd. Was I too strong, or were Cho Gyung-pung and the rest simply too weak? While I was still turning that over, I caught the faint sound of a door opening. I dropped at once, shut my eyes, and pulled the demon's severed arm over myself. That did not feel like enough. I raised my own hand, pried the dead claw open, and set it around my throat as if it were choking me, then splayed my arms and played at having fainted dead away. Autumn came on and the worst of the heat broke. I was harvesting in the heart-calming grass plot while Li Ya and Meng Rang watched from beyond the fence. Half of Li Ya's body was wound in white cloth and 2 shocking scars ran across his face nearly to his right eye, marks that made me wonder what he had been through. Meng Rang looked untouched. He stared at me and marveled that I could pick herbs so cheerfully, as though I had never crossed paths with the greedy demon at all. Li Ya answered calmly, blank-faced, the scars lending him a faint air of menace. "Perhaps I simply found my joy in hardship," he said, and no one could say whether the smile held once I shut my own door. The night 4 days back still felt close as last evening. When Li Ya thought of his own meeting with the demon, a lingering dread rose in him, and he knew he had lived through it on pure luck. Cho Gyung-pung had fared worse, an arm torn away, while Jung Hyung-dan, Jang Chun-chu, and Meng Rang came out untouched. That morning the sect had sent several cultivators, the strongest at the 9th level of Foundation establishment, to question me about what had happened. I played the shaken fool who knew nothing. In the end, they judged that some hidden hand had stepped in to save the valley's utility disciples, since a boy without a trace of spiritual energy could never have slain the thing. Afterward, I made a point of moving to a different room. Jang Chun-chu's manner toward me warmed, as if guilt sat heavy on him. While the other two discussed me over the fence, I lost myself in the pleasure of drawing lifespan out of the rank 2 herbs. A single rank 2 herb gave 2 to 5 years, and harvesting for Li Ya and Meng Rang meant 60 of them this round, which was simply wonderful. My mind kept drifting back to the greedy demon, though. Killing it had brought 52 years, which seemed to say that cutting down demons and monsters yielded far more lifespan than herbs ever would. Then I remembered the terror of that night and the wounds Cho Gyung-pung and Li Ya carried, and I threw the idea out at once. There was no need. I was in no rush to grow strong, so why walk out and stake my life on it? I would not be reckless. I would grow in the dark, quietly. A while later, I finished the 60 stalks and carried the basket to Meng Rang to hand them in. He gave a small fake cough and said that this time I should be the one to deliver them to the first senior brother. The memory of his own cowardice that night left him without the face to steal my credit again. I did not refuse. I nodded, smiled, said a courteous word to Li Ya, and set off for Jang Chun-chu's building, while Li Ya turned toward the distant woods and Meng Rang rubbed his nose, at a loss. In the main hall, I handed all the grass to Jang Chun-chu. He did not send me off at once, but drew me aside to ask after me, whether I had been sleeping well of late. Every time he pictured me with the greedy demon's claw at my throat, guilt filled him, because a first senior brother who could not shield his junior brother felt himself pathetic. I had always been so honest and biddable that the thought of such a junior dying would have grieved him for real. Then he told me, in a serious voice, never to speak of the greedy demon again. He had gone to the outer sect that day and heard that the thing had been kept by a certain elder of the sect. The matter could not spread, he said, and I should act as though it had never happened. I frowned to hear it, so that was the shape of it, and no wonder the demon had roamed free so long. An elder like that, Jang Chun-chu said uneasily, was not someone we could cross, since a single word from him could make our whole valley vanish. A man of my humble birth understood better than anyone the gulf that rank and station carved out. Only by enduring, he said, could one survive. Then he drew a secret manual from his robes and told me it was a technique the master had prepared for me. The master had exchanged it at the cost of 5 years of sect contribution, since after all I had suffered a wrong. Joy lit my face at once. I took the manual and read the 3 words on its cover: withered wind leg. I bowed low and thanked the first senior brother and the master both. Jang Chun-chu blinked, smiled, and told me to practice it in my free hours, that it might guard my life one day, and that I must not pass it to Meng Rang. As for Li Ya, he said, the boy had shown extraordinary gifts. The master had resolved to help him break into Foundation establishment, so within 2 years at most he would leave the valley for good. None of that surprised me. A talent at Li Ya's level was plainly wasted here. Jang Chun-chu traded a few more pleasantries with me and then let me go. After I shut the door, I heard him sigh softly to himself, calling some woman's name, telling So-Rian to wait for him. My steps paused on the stairs, and then I went on down. The greedy demon had killed no one in the valley, yet it left the air there changed. Li Ya grew more secretive, vanishing into the woods once his chores were done, and even Meng Rang began to cultivate in earnest. I ground at the withered wind leg for a month before I barely coaxed it onto my panel. The effort so discouraged me that I gave it up, meaning to simply spend lifespan on it later. Sun and moon traded places, autumn leaves buried the valley, and I became its busiest figure, my shape turning up in one garden after another. Jang Chun-chu trusted me more and more and stopped watching over my work. Jung Hyundan shut himself away at his alchemy day after day, so seldom seen that a glimpse of him once a month was rare. Autumn gave way to winter. Pure white snow came down, and the whole valley sank into a world of white. The new year arrived in the depth of the snowfall. Only when the winter snow began to melt did someone finally come in from outside, and he came looking for me in particular. Inside my room, I shut the door and poured hot tea for the young man already seated at the table. He wore the green Taoist robe of a Taeyeon sect outer sect disciple, and he glanced around and asked how I had been this past year and a half. Of the 5 who had followed Ji Hiawu into the sect, only he and I had come as servants. His name was Du Ya, a bearer of a 4-element spiritual root, and with the Ji clan's help he had made it into the outer sect. A year and more apart had changed his whole bearing. I told him it had been fine. He looked me over, shook his head a little, and said I was a strange one. I had insisted on coming here myself, he pointed out. When the standing of the 3rd young miss and the clan could easily have wedged me into the outer sect, why had I chosen to suffer in a place with no road to cultivation? I compared his span of near 1,000 years against my own barely 150 for him. My talent had always been poor, I answered with a smile, and I feared death and pain, so a quiet corner like this suited me better. Duya shook his head and laughed, scolded me a few more times, then came to the point of his visit. Young Master Ji-Rim, he said, meant to build momentum and widen the 3rd young miss's network inside the sect, and the 2 of us had our part to play. So I should gather medicinal herbs as diligently as ever, and he would come for them every half year. Such herbs made fine bargaining chips for winning other disciples over. I agreed on the spot. The herbs meant little to me anyway. Pleased at how easy I was to deal with, Duya smiled, and we talked a while longer before I walked into the mouth of the valley and turned back. Just as I reached the courtyard, I found Li Ya waiting for me. He came up, pressed a secret manual against my chest, and said he was preparing to leave. I should take this sword technique as a parting gift, he said, in thanks for all I had done for him over the past year and a half. I caught the secret manual, and a subtle ache rose in my chest. I had known for a long time that Li Ya would go, yet hearing him say it aloud pulled a thread of real reluctance out of me. In this whole valley, I had only 2 friends, since Zhang Hyundan and Jang Chunchu gave me nothing to talk about. And Li Ya was worlds better than Meng Rang, who was practically a beast. I asked whether he was close to Foundation establishment. My probe already answered before he did, since his cultivation had climbed to the 9th level of the Qi refining realm. It was a frightening pace. I half wondered whether some hidden expert waited in the woods to coach him, or whether the soul of some wronged master hid inside that young body. Li Ya only nodded and said he meant to attempt Foundation establishment the following month. Then he paused and turned serious. After this parting, he said, we would likely never meet again, and I should not let Meng Rang walk all over me, or the fool would trample me flat. There would be other disciples in the valley in time, and a senior brother needed a bit of a temper of his own. I was speechless. 2 people had lectured me in a single day, though Li Ya at least meant it more sincerely than Duya had. The reluctance in me deepened. Growing up in the Ji clan, I had walked on thin ice and never held a true friend. Only people I flattered on purpose. I had never once had a friend like Li Ya who would press a gift into my hands. I understood that his words would come true, that this parting might well last a lifetime. So I told him to stop being so reckless himself, that staying alive mattered more than anything. A man who had leapt from utility disciple to the brink of Foundation establishment in under 2 years, carried top-tier talent, I said. As long as he lived, he would surely become a great cultivator the whole world knew by name. That drew a smile out of him at last. We stood in the courtyard talking a while, and when Meng Rang came back and heard the news, his mood sank as well. In the end, Li Ya left. He said his farewells to the 2 of us, went to pay his respects to Zhang Hyundan, and was finally led out of the valley by Jang Chunchu. The winter snow had not yet melted through, and the Medicine Valley felt far lonelier without him. In my spare hours, I began working through the sword manual Li Ya had left me. My ambition was small. I did not chase mastery, only enough proficiency to make the technique surface on my status panel, since a manual took time to register there. I did not want to find myself in danger one day, desperate to spend lifespan on a skill, only to learn it was too late to begin. The manual was called the Li Family 7 Swords. The name was plain, but I knew this Li family stood for the imperial house of the Tichang dynasty, so I practiced it in earnest. Winter passed and spring came, and green life spread through the valley again. After Li Ya, Jang Chunchu brought in another boy, a 14-year-old named Soqian. He was a solitary sort who spoke little to me or Meng Rang at first. After I helped him harvest his herbs a few times, he warmed to me, and we talked more, though he stayed a quiet one all the same. Summer arrived, and my panel told me I had turned 17. I had never known which day my birthday fell on, and I had never cared. What I looked forward to far more than any birthday was the day I could finally harvest grade 3 herbs. Most of the plants here needed several years to ripen, so my lifespan no longer climbed the way it once had. Its growth had begun to slow. Then one day Jiang Chunchu came to find me smiling and asked whether I would take a task with a substantial reward. I raised an eyebrow, surprised there were tasks in the valley at all. Swallowing my instinctive wariness, I asked what sort of task it was. An outer sect disciple was going out for training and would not return for at least 2 years. He said, and the task was to tend the herbs in that disciple's immortal cave. When the man came back, he would pay me 10 mid-grade spirit stones. The offer tempted me at once. Spirit stones ran from low-grade up through medium-high and peerless, each tier worth 100 of the one below it. A single mid-grade stone equaled 100 low-grade ones, while my whole monthly pay was a single low-grade spirit stones. The task came out to 1,000 low-grade spirit stones across 2 years, and I could hardly not be moved. Still, I asked, hesitant, whether that senior was trustworthy. Jiang Chunchu blinked, then burst out laughing and praised my caution. The man was an old friend, he said, one who had joined the Taehyun sect the same year he had. He had chosen me because I was diligent and honest, where Meng Rang would have left him uneasy. The immortal cave sat only a dozen miles from the valley, and I would need to go just twice a month. I wavered a while longer, then agreed. I had gone half a month without a harvest, and watching my lifespan sit still made me restless, since I missed the feeling of spending it too much. The Dragon Force Primordial art added only 1 year to my span each month. Without a gift that seized lifespan outright, I would have been thrilled with that, but now I was greedy. I could not even be sure how long the art would go on feeding my span, since everything had its limit. Seeing me agree, Jiang Chunchu led me straight out of the valley. I had not left in 2 years, and stepping past the entrance made me nervous. Beyond it stretched an unbroken run of forested mountains, sunlight falling through the trees in rings of rainbow color, strangely beautiful. Jiang Chunchu tapped his waist, and a long sword shot from the storage pouch at his hip. He caught my arm, leapt up, and landed us both on the blade to ride it through the air. I was so frightened I clamped my arms around his waist. The hot summer wind tore at my black hair, while envy filled my eyes. Riding a sword through the sky was the very mark of an immortal cultivator, and I had never guessed the senior brother had such a trick in him. Feeling my grip, he laughed and told me to keep my eyes open and learn the path, since I would have to fly it myself, one day. I could not help asking whether he would teach me this sword-riding art. He said I would have to cultivate hard, and that once I reached the 4th level of the Qi refining realm, he would teach me to control a blade. The 4th level of Qi refining, I echoed. As long as I was willing to work, he said, I would reach it one day, and he straightened his back as he spoke, wearing a bright, sunny smile. I could almost hear him thinking that in my eyes his image now stood tall and grand, and hoping it would inspire me to stop being so lazy about cultivation. To him I was good in every way but one, that I never liked to cultivate and spent my idle hours buried in books. I kept my thoughts to myself. Was the 4th level of Qi refining truly so hard? What if I poured 100 years of lifespan into it? If that failed, then 500, and if 500 still fell short, the thing would simply be absurd. We chatted on the sword until we came down in a stretch of forest, and even after landing I was still savoring the flight. Jiang Chunchu led me through a dense thicket to a cliff face, raised a jade pendant, and pressed it into a groove in the stone. The immortal cave had a restriction on it, he said, and I would have to carry this pendant from now on and never lose it, or the trouble would be endless. I nodded. The cliff shuddered. A stone door surfaced and swung open, and he took the pendant back and led me inside. The two of us vanished into the dark, and a few breaths later the gate slammed shut. Behind us, the cave ran larger than I had expected, its entry tunnel alone some 15 feet long, opening into a broad stone chamber where my eyes went straight to a bed of planted herbs. They grew densely, at least 100 of them, filling most of the floor, and even my eyes could tell at a glance their grades were nothing simple. Were all the outer sect disciples of the sect this rich? Jiang Chunchu began walking me through which herbs to cut, and how each kind should be tended. The cave held its own restriction and never lacked water. He said, but too much water would kill the plants. Any herb left uncut past its time would burst into spiritual chi flames and take the whole bed with it. Seeds waited on the table for me to plant once I had harvested, and the disciple had laid out spirit-protecting paper there in advance. Then he clapped my shoulder and handed me the pendant. He would leave first, he said, and I should find my own way home when I finished, and if I had not returned by evening he would come looking. I saw him out before turning back, minding my manners. I did not fall on the herbs at once, but surveyed the chamber instead. It was plain, only a stone bed, a stone table, and 2 stone stools, though books hid on the walls behind a curtain of vines. I had no wish to open them. What if the cultivator had set some watching restriction over them? Better to earn my lifespan honestly and stir up nothing. So I harvested the ripe herbs, and the first cut told me I had seized 9 years of lifespan from the spirit flame grass, a grade 3 plant. Grade 3. My breath caught. I no longer knew whether my grasp of herb grades was flawed or whether the outer sect simply lived far better than my little valley. Whatever the answer, I would enjoy it first. That first batch came to 11 plants in 89 years, and my total span climbed past 1,260. My probe swept the room and even found grade 4 plants growing there. What a wealthy employer. I was delighted, and I meant to keep this rich patron happy for the long term. Then a thought struck me. Could I not do the same work for other disciples of the sect? Every disciple went out for training sooner or later. No, I told myself. I should handle this one job well first and take it slow, since a wicked employer might try to squeeze me. I was only a utility disciple, and the moment I clashed with a formal disciple, I would be the one thrown away. So I planted the spirit flame grass seeds with great care and left the cave, sealing the gate behind me. I walked fast toward the valley, afraid of meeting a demon like the greedy demon again. The Dragon Force primordial art carried me back to the entrance in under half an hour, and before I even drew close, I spotted someone. Cho Gyung-pung. He had lost his right arm, and a weathered heaviness hung on him now, his black robes making him look like a wholly different man from before. The moment I saw Cho Gyung-pung, he saw me too. I was about to hurry over in greeting when he leapt several yards through the air, gliding down the hillside, to land before me like a settling goose. He said I must be Go-an, and that he had something to ask me. I bowed with feigned nerves and answered that I was, and that I would surely tell him the truth of whatever he wished to know. My honesty softened his face. He asked gently whether I still remembered the greedy demon's features, since she had seized me by the neck that night. I shook my head. The oil lamp had been out, I said, so I never saw her face at all, and the fright had knocked me senseless the instant she appeared. As I spoke, I quietly stirred my blood and chi until my face flushed red on cue. Seeing me so shaken, most of his anger drained away, and I could almost hear him mock himself for leaning on a mere utility disciple. His look turned kind. If I remembered anything or ran into anything, he said, I could reach him, and he drew out a spirit stone the size of an egg. It was a special stone, he told me, and feeding spiritual power into it would let me speak with him. He tossed it to me, leapt up, and a long sword flew from his waist out of empty air. He stepped onto it and shot out of the woods, leaving a wake of falling leaves. Illusion or not, I felt he had grown stronger for the loss of the arm. I thought no more of it and carried the stone toward the valley, sighing to myself over when I might own a storage pouch of my own. Dappled sunlight fell through the trees as I walked, and for a moment it draped me like a cloak of many colors. Time slid past, and in the space of a blink, 2 years were gone. At 19, I walked through the forest a little taller than before and sturdier in the frame. Even in plain cloth, I looked clean and neat, my eyes especially bright. My long hair was tied back loosely with a grass cord, 2 thin strands falling over my brow to lend me a careless air. Behind me trailed a plain-faced boy a head shorter, a bamboo basket on his back, wiping sweat from his forehead as he went. So Chan called out weakly to ask how much farther it was. He was the only one in the valley junior to me, and he liked to trail me everywhere. Having heard that I tended immortal caves for outer sect disciples, he had begged so long that I finally brought him along this once. I had my own reasons for agreeing. Jang Chunchu had told me the day before that the cave's owner had returned, and to guard against trouble I wanted a second person present, since ill intent might hesitate before a witness. I meant So Cheon no harm either. If things truly went wrong, my Dragon Force primordial art had not been trained for nothing. Almost there, I said without looking back. And truthfully, I was starting to understand why Jang Chunchu had liked me so much, since an obedient junior brother was a real comfort. So Cheon groaned. He had heard those 2 words at least 8 times, and had he known, he would never have come. 12 miles was a long way for a mortal, and between the rough mountain paths and the brutal heat, he felt half dead. I did not bother comforting him further, because this time we really were close. Half a cup of tea later, I pushed the brush aside and came before the mountain wall. Instead of opening the gate, I cupped my fists and announced that the junior Go-an had come to return the cave's jade pendant to his senior. So Cheon stood beyond the bushes, sizing up the wall with open wonder. His birth was no better than mine, and he knew little of the cultivation world, so an outer sect disciple loomed as a great figure in his eyes. The mountain gate rolled open, and a raspy voice drifted out from within, telling me to come in. I turned and told So Cheon to wait for me outside. He did not dare follow me in, and the marvel of a cave opening was already worth the whole trip to him. I stepped inside more confident than I had been 2 years before, and my confidence came from the lifespan I had banked, now past 3,400 years. Beyond the cave's herbs, Zhong Hyundan had begun teaching me to harvest 3rd-grade plants across these 2 years, so my span had grown fast. A man's confidence rests on his strength, and though I had cultivated only a sliver of spiritual power, I was no longer who I had been. Through the tunnel, I found a man seated at a stone table. Thin, his Taoist robes hanging loose. His hair was a mix of black and white, his eye sockets sunken and his cheekbones sharp, the whole face suggesting a calculating soul. At first glance, I judged him no kind man. The probe named him Ju Moya, 9th level of the key refining realm, 58 years old, a lifespan of 130 against a ceiling of 140. His ceiling did not even reach Zhang Chunchu's, which meant his talent ran lower, and his higher cultivation likely came from stacking medicinal pills. I turned the thought over as I crossed to him, drew out the jade pendant, and offered it up in both hands. Joe Moya took it and said softly that I had done well and left him satisfied, that a bag on the table held 10 mid-grade spirit stones, and that I should take them and go. I received the bag respectfully, waited in secret, and thanked him. He waved me off. I nodded, bowed again, and turned to leave. And as I turned, my sharp eyes snagged on something, so I threw out a probe on reflex. It read the greedy demon, 2nd order, 31 years old, a span of 140 against a ceiling of 180. I kept my face still and walked out fast. Joe Moya watched my back go, his eyes turning cold, and only after the gate closed did he snort and mutter for me to count myself lucky. The restriction on an outer sect disciple's cave was a crude thing, little more than a low spell mechanism, so I caught his words plainly from outside, and they left me more uneasy still. There truly was a problem. I had wondered before why the greedy demon had never troubled this cave on its rounds, and now I understood. The man was tied to it. So Chion asked, all concern, whether it had gone smoothly, and I smiled and said it had, and told him it was time to head back. He nodded, and we walked back the way we had come. Once we were well clear, he began asking what the cave's owner had been like, and I gave him a simple picture that left him full of longing. For the rest of the road, I had no heart to mind him. My head was full of the greedy demon and Jumoya's parting words. No, I could not pretend I had seen nothing. It was far too dangerous. I thought of the spirit stone Chog Young Pung had left me, and decided to ask his help. But before that I had to raise my own strength just in case. After 3 years of hoarding lifespan without spending a drop, the mere thought of it thrilled me. The Dragon Force primordial art could bury my aura, so even with spiritual power I could keep it well hidden. This time I meant to raise my cultivation first, and my means of attack after. Should I evolve the Withered Windleg, I wondered, or the Lee family 7 swords? The question gnawed at me the whole way. An hour later we reached the valley. I took Sochian's basket, heavy with the common herbs we had gathered along the road, and carried it to my own courtyard while he dragged himself off to his, too spent for anything else. I shut my door, set the basket and the cloth bag on the table, and went to the bed. I drew a deep breath and felt out the others in the valley first. Mang Rang was drilling spells in the forest. Zhang Chunjan was refining pills. And Zhang Chunjan was refining pills. And Zhang Chunjan was refining pills. And Zhang Chunjan was refining pills. My lifespan stood at 19 years lived, against 3,463. My root now a fairly good 5 elements root. My cultivation set at the first level of the Qi refining realm. My techniques the same trio as before, with the Dragon Force primordial art marked proficient. My 2 ultimate arts, the Withered Windleg and the Lee family 7 swords, were still unmastered. I fed a single year into my cultivation, cautious, and the panel told me a year of Qi absorption had barely moved me, given my plain talent and ordinary technique. Still, I felt the change, 1 sliver of spiritual power becoming 2. My mouth twitched, and my gaze slid to the Springwood art. That art and its cousin the Fire Control art were all I truly held for drawing Qi. The latter was a scrap taught to me by an old slave back at the G clan while I burned firewood. Fine, I thought. I would not wait for some loftier method. Since I could evolve them with lifespan, even the plainest technique could be lifted into a peerless divine art in my hands. I chose to sink 100 years into the Springwood art. Year by year the lines unfolded. 1 year gave a slight gain, and 10 mastered the art and quickened my Qi absorption. 50 carried it to major achievement and made my absorption 10 times faster than before, and 100 years granted a fresh insight that turned it into the Spring Origin mantra. A rush of memory poured into me, all of it the cultivation of that new mantra. The Spring Origin mantra was far simpler than the Dragon Force primordial art, so it did not take long before I opened my eyes. The first thing I did was listen. So Qian had already fallen asleep and the rest were busy at their own work, so for now no one watched me. Now came the question. Should I keep refining the Spring Origin mantra, or turn it straight onto my cultivation? The higher my grasp of a technique, the faster my cultivation would climb and the less lifespan it would cost. After turning it over, I decided the technique itself mattered most and could not be rushed. I would spend 1,000 years on it first and see. I did not pour the lifespan in at once. With the Dragon Force primordial art fresh in memory, I feared stirring up too much commotion, so I would wait for nightfall. By then, given the nerve of Zheng Hyundan and Zhang Chunchu, any disturbance would only frighten them deeper into hiding. Night soon fell, I waited until Mang Rang had gone to his room to rest, then called up my panel, fixed my attention on the spring origin mantra, and chose to invest 1,000 years into its evolution. I even rubbed the white spirit rat for luck while I begged the heavens not to waste those 1,000 years. The lines rose one after another. A year gave little. 10 carried my understanding to a new realm. 100 drew fresh ideas from the earth and forests. And 200 turned the mantra into the azure woodspring life art. 500 years lifted my grasp of it to a transcendent stage and improved my wood spiritual root. 800 drew insight from the very nature of heaven and earth and evolved it into the divine wood pure yang art. 1,000 carried my mastery of that art to perfection and improved my wood root. Again, I caught the key words and was overjoyed, and then a flood of memory swept into my mind. My whole body burst with green light, and threads of forest green spiritual chi rose from the floor of the room. At the same moment, Jiang Chunshu, cultivating in his own room, opened his eyes toward his window as a sudden gale rose outside and set the frame rattling. He hurried over, took one look, and shut the window fast. Then he stepped to the table, blew out the lamp, and hid himself in bed, muttering that he had to leave soon, that this valley grew more sinister by the day. Mang Rang was just as frightened, shivering under his blankets, while So Cheon, worn out from the road, slept like a log and snored like thunder. Zhong Hyondan sat before his pill furnace and glanced up at the night sky, his eyes deep and calm as a still well, holding neither fear nor even curiosity. A long while later I came back to myself and opened my eyes, feeling as though the whole world had changed. I could sense the wood attribute spiritual chi in the air and the living vigor of every plant and tree. A marvelous thing. When I called the lines up again and saw my wood spiritual root improved, I was delighted. To think that cultivating a technique could raise a spiritual root outright, which meant I need never force by root aptitude again, that bottomless pit I had tried only once and still felt scarred by. I circulated the divine wood pure yang art, and unlike before I drank in the wood chi of heaven and earth in an instant. The energy flowed into my core and turned to wood, attribute spiritual power. The whole process ran smooth and seamless. A single breath was worth more than half a year of my old effort. I felt as if I were dreaming, as if I had become a genius overnight, and in that case there was no rush to force my cultivation higher. When my lifespan first crossed 1,000 years, the probe had opened to me, so perhaps at 10,000 another new power would surface. With a cultivation speed like this, I could raise my realm through honest practice. My cultivation could wait, but my means of attack could not. The Dragon Force primordial art carried no moves of its own, so my eye fell on the withered wind leg. The Li family 7 swords was a sword art, but I owned no fine blade, and swordwork leaned hard on cultivation level. The withered wind leg was another matter, since it rode on the legs. My raw strength already let me slap a foundation establishment greedy demon dead, and joined to a leg art its power would surely soar. How much lifespan should I spend? I hung in the old dilemma, since too little was pointless and too much was painful. Fine, I would make it around 500 and be done. I fed 500 years into the withered wind leg with real excitement. The lines came in their steps. 1 year left, the moves fluid but hollow. 10 drove the art to the peak of mastery, and 100 returned it to a natural ease and promoted it to the wind shadow leg. 200 carried that to major achievement, and 400 evolved it into the whirlwind shadowless kick. 500 brought the kick to comprehensive mastery and deepened my grasp of body and movement arts. Understanding of body and movement arts, I thought, could that be comprehension itself? The question had barely formed before the memories of the whirlwind shadowless kick filled my mind. At dawn, the first light swept across the valley, and before it could touch my threshold, my door opened. I walked into the courtyard, faced the rising sun, stretched, and felt my whole spirit made new, my face still bright with the last of my excitement. I pulled up the panel in silence. My lifespan read 19 against 1,862, my root now a first-rate wood root with the other 4 elements decent. My cultivation stood at the second level of chi refining. My techniques, the divine wood pure yang art and the dragon force primordial art, both at perfection. My ultimate arts were the whirlwind shadowless kick at comprehensive mastery, beside the still unlearned Li family 7 swords. Second level of chi refining. When the divine wood pure yang art's legacy poured into me the night before, my spiritual power had surged. A night of chi absorption on top of it had pushed me cleanly into the second level. I was no longer a wastrel without a scrap of power, and the feeling of spending lifespan was truly exhilarating. My thoughts on the road of immortal cultivation began to widen. I had no wish to roam the world, since slaying demons might grow my span faster, but sent the risk of death soaring with it. What I dreamed of was becoming master of the Medicine Valley. Zhang Jiandan had few years left, and Zhang Chunchu meant to leave the mountain, so the seat of Valley Master was bound to fall to me. When it did, I would gather a crop of utility disciples to handle the cultivation while I kept only the harvesting for myself, which would be wonderful. I stood with my hands on my hips and looked over the surrounding peaks. It was not impossible to plant more herbs across those slopes. Jung Hyundan had never expanded the valley, likely because expansion meant nothing to him. A mere hired hand of the sect. For me it was different. I did not want a larger share of herbs, only the lifespan locked inside them. The more I thought, the more it thrilled me, and I began kicking my legs in place to stretch, running through the withered wind leg, its form sharp and full of vigor. Before long, Mang Rang came out of the neighboring room and caught sight of my legwork, his eyes going wide. At 19, my body had filled out, and my legs swung like whips, so that even without moving from the spot, the force of the wind brushed his face and left him stunned. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he had mistaken someone else for me, wondering since when I had grown so strong. Feeling his stare, I drew my leg back, turned, and smiled, and asked whether I had woken him. He hurried over, looked me up and down, and demanded how I had suddenly grown so strong, and whether the demonic wind of the night before had anything to do with me. I rolled my eyes and told him that yes, it had been me. I had practiced the withered wind leg the master taught and resonated with the heavenly Tao until the earth shook, a truly world-shaking feat. So why, having heard the commotion, had he not come out to witness my glory? He would not admit his own cowardice, so he snorted. My legwork might be sharp, he said, but without spiritual power behind it, it could never raise such a gale. Besides, there had been spiritual chi fluctuations too, meaning either a demon feeding on heaven and earth chi, or a great cultivator breaking through. I smiled and raised my leg to boot him in the backside. He shrieked and asked whether I dared kick him, whether I was rebelling, whether now that Li Ya was gone I no longer wished to call him Big Brother. I asked whether calling him Big Brother meant staying at his side for life, and whether he did not want to become an outer sect disciple. Fair point, he admitted. He was different from me, and we fell to wrestling and playing. An hour later, Jang Chunchu found me and walked me around the whole valley, pointing out and explaining every inch of ground and every herb. I listened closely, and the more I listened, the stranger it felt, as if he were setting his affairs in final order. Had the commotion of the night before scared him witless? I wanted to warn him, then reconsidered. That Ju Moya was no good, likely running dirty errands for the great cultivator behind the greedy demon. Once Cho Gyungpeng untangled the matter, Jang Chunchu might be dragged in as the man's close friend. Better for him to leave the mountain early. I swore I was not after the eldest disciple's seat, that I truly weighed his well-being. Having mastered the divine wood pure yang art, I was in no hurry to reach out to Cho Gyungpeng. I could protect myself now, and a summons the day after I returned would be hard to explain. What I feared was not Ju Moya, but the man behind him, whose standing, by Jang Chunchu's account, the whole valley together could not budge. It was a fine time to raise my cultivation while I waited. Jang Chunchu spent an hour leading me around, even up the nearby slopes, and only when his throat had gone dry did he take me to find Jung Hyundan. I saw the pill furnace before the old man, and my eyes filled with curiosity. I had long heard he was skilled in the art of alchemy, and I wondered whether I might learn it. Once I did and spent a little lifespan, I could become an alchemy grandmaster overnight. Jung Hyundan rose, looked at me, and said that from this day I was the eldest senior brother of the Medicine Valley. Shocked, I turned on instinct to Jang Chunchu and asked in a panic what had happened to him. Watching me fret over him, Jang Chunchu looked deeply gratified. On the verge of leaving the mountain, the thing he was least willing to part with was not his master but his junior brother. Me too obedient and too honest by half. He shared Li Ya's old worry that I would be bullied once he was gone. He had spent 40 years in the valley, he said, and it was time to go. His talent was plain, with no hope of foundation establishment in this life, and rather than waste away here, he would go down the mountain and enjoy what years remained. I should take the senior brother's seat, since that lazy Mang Rang could never hold it. I hesitated and said that without him here I feared I might not manage. Jung Hyundan spoke up saying that if I did not dare then Mang Rang could. It was not that I could not do it, I cut in at once. Jang Chunchu, who had meant to comfort me, was left blinking, and the old man gave me a long knowing look and said nothing. I coughed and covered myself, saying I could not let the senior brother's wishes down, and that in truth I only feared Mang Rang ordering me about every day if the seat fell to him. Jang Chunchu burst out laughing, and the mood in the room eased. He began encouraging me, and I listened closely. After a while, he lifted the hem of his robe, knelt, and pressed his forehead to the floor. 3 times before the old man, then rose and left, and I was alone with Jung Hyundan. See that, the old man said, his eyes calm. This valley could not keep people, and if I did not want to spend my whole life here, I should say so in advance, since as my master he might lend a hand. I answered quickly that I was willing to stay for a lifetime. Do not rush to answer, he said, because it truly might be a lifetime. I would not dare lie, I told him. I truly wanted to stay for life. To others the work here might be dirty and hard, but to me these were the most comfortable days I had ever known. My master looked after me, and my fellow disciples were kind. I meant it, and at that moment I had to show my sincerity. Then he said flatly that I must have some background. Surviving the greedy demon had been no accident, he said, and the riot of heaven and earth chi the night before had come straight from my courtyard. I grew anxious and swore I had none, that my only backing might be the G clan's third young miss, Ji Haowu, and even then I had only been her servant. The G clan, he repeated, and for the first time I saw his expression break wide open. Wariness, anger, and fear gathered on his face at once, twisting it into something distorted and frightening. My stomach dropped. Could the old man carry a grudge against the G clan? I felt sure I had stumbled into trouble. Then he drew a slow breath and said that so it was, and that from now on I was the senior brother of the valley. The turn steadied me. Sincere or not, I would take the seat first, since even if he meant me harm, he had little time left, and I feared him plotting against me not at all. Could his flesh prove tougher than the greedy demons? I promised at once to be diligent and never fail his hopes. He waved a hand and told me to go call Meng Rang and So Qian. A stick of incense later, the three of us came down from the loft. So Qian thrilled, and calling me senior brother with every breath. Meng Rang furious. How was I the senior brother and not him? He demanded, when his cultivation ran higher and his birth ran higher too. His words did not anger me. I turned, smiled, and told him a senior brother's seat was no easy thing, that once taken it lasted a lifetime. The master had given it to me, I said, because Meng Rang still had a heart set on cultivation. Really, he said, his anger sinking. Of course, I answered, and reminded him that our old senior brother had stayed 40 years, and how many 40-year stretches a life even held. He fell silent, his face working, and the look he turned on me brimmed with sympathy. He clapped my shoulder and said I had been wronged. So Qian went quiet too, since he also nursed a dream of cultivation and had no wish to spend his life here. I feigned a wounded silence while I howled with laughter inside. Meng Rang really was easy to fool. And so my life as senior brother began. Zheng Hiandan put me over all the valley's affairs, and I handed the planting and tending straight to So Qian and Meng Rang, while I kept the harvesting for myself. Meng Rang, likely still guilty, raised no complaint. Harvest came rarely, seldom more than twice a month, so I spent most of my hours cultivating, always in hiding, never letting a soul catch a glimpse. 3 months on, I reached the 5th level of chi refining without anyone the wiser. The divine wood pure yang art at perfection was a fearsome thing. I gave cultivation less time than Meng Rang did, and still left myself hours to read. Autumn leaves blanketed the valley, and the peaks around it turned their mournful colors. I stood at the wooden railing, watching the third-grade herbs near ripeness, stroking the white spirit rat in my hand, when a sound turned my head. Zheng Hyundan was walking in from the entrance with 2 youngsters behind him, a boy and a girl of perhaps 14 or 15. I threw out a probe on instinct. The girl, Ye Ran, stood at the first level of chi refining, 14 years old, and the boy No Guga at the second level, 15. 2 more helpers had arrived. The corners of my mouth curled, and I went to greet the old man with cupped hands. No Guga and Ye Ran looked me over with open curiosity. My features had always been fair, and grown now and refined by the Dragon Force primordial art and the divine wood pure yang art. My bearing stood out enough to remind them of the proper sect cultivators they had seen. The old man told me these were my junior brother and sister, and that I should settle them in. He called me his little Anne in a fond tone that raised the hair on my arms. I bowed to his departing back all the same. The 2 bowed to me at once, very respectfully, which pleased me greatly. Better manners than Li Ya or Meng Rang had ever shown Jiang Chunchu. Warmth toward the pair rose in me on the spot. I introduced myself and had them do the same. No Guga was dark-skinned and shabbily dressed, a farm boy by the look of him, though his eyes were bright and quick. Yi Ran was thin and small, her clothes clearly wealthy, her face no more than pleasant. I told them their senior brother would settle them in first, and my gentle manner eased the nerves out of them. On the way to the disciples' courtyard, Ye Ran asked about the others in the valley, and I answered honestly, then called Meng Rang and So Qian over so all 4 could meet. Unlike Jiang Chunshu, I truly meant to manage the bonds among my fellow disciples well, since I was the one who would become Valley Master. The arrival of the 2 put me in mind of Ju Moya and the greedy demon again. No, I told myself, this had to be settled soon, before my junior brother and sister wandered into danger. That night I shut my door, drew out Cho Gyungpung's spirit stone, and fed a thread of spiritual power into it until it warmed in my hand. It was my first time using such a thing, and I found it novel. After a few breaths his voice came from within, asking who it was. I swallowed a complaint about how many people he had handed these stones to, and said I was Go-An of the Medicine Valley. He fell silent. I felt a flicker of awkwardness, but he soon asked whether I had word of the greedy demon. Yes, I said firmly, and laid out all I had seen and heard. When I finished he asked, whether it was true. Every word, I told him, no lies, and the man's cave sat close enough to ours that I feared he would harm us. Good, he said. He would take full charge of the matter, find the cave's address through the outer sect, and trouble me no further. I thanked him for his understanding and asked if it resolved cleanly that he not mention me, since my talent was plain and I wanted only a quiet life. He agreed to be discreet and cut the connection. I set the stone down and combed carefully back through every dealing I had had with the two men, checking for any slip. What a hassle. I only wanted to farm. After tipping Cho Gyongpung off, I patrolled each day and kept an eye on my junior brother and sister, afraid they would stray out of the valley. 3 days passed without a stir. Then late on the fourth night I felt a riot of spiritual energy beyond the valley and caught the faint ring of clashing weapons. The fight had begun. I slipped out quietly and made for the entrance, meaning to stand guard there so no demon or villain could steal into the valley and slaughter my fellow disciples. The battle in the distance ran fierce, and even at the entrance I could only judge it by my ears, since too many peaks stood between us. Then something pricked at me, and I spun around to look back into the valley. My gaze landed on a loft where Zhang Hyundan stood at the window, watching me from afar. The bright moon poured down, and in the dark loft he looked like a vengeful spirit, standing my hair on end. He had found me out. I frowned, suddenly unsure what to do, and while I wavered he drew the window slowly shut, though his gaze lingered like two beams of cold light. I did not fear the old man. I feared only that he would give me away. Then again, it should not come to that. If he were truly bound to the great cultivator behind the greedy demon, why summon Cho Gyongpung to guard us at all? It would be pointless. If these utility disciples died, they died, and the other side would not even need an excuse to report it to the sect. I forced my mind off the old man's motives and fixed my attention beyond the valley to catch any incursion, and I kept watch the whole night through. When dawn neared, I slipped quietly back to my room. I wanted to go see the battlefield, but for fear of traps I made myself wait. Ye Ran and No Guga had brought a living warmth to the valley, dragging Sochian around the grounds until even that silent boy grew lively among them. I leaned on a garden railing with the Travels of the Azure Wanderer in both hands, letting the autumn breeze wash over me, my eyes drifting now and then toward Zhang Hyundan's pavilion. The look we had traded the night before stayed with me. I wanted to speak with him and feared upsetting the fragile balance. Just then No Guga came up to me, eager, and said he had heard from Meng Rang that I was skilled in a profound move. He asked whether I would teach him, offering to take over all my picking in return. I smiled and told him it was hardly profound, but that I would gladly teach him. He should leave the picking to me, I said, since I needed the work and besides, picking was a hobby of mine. That only deepened his awe, and he decided his senior brother was a truly good man. I tucked the book into my robes and began teaching him the withered wind leg. Before long, Sochian and Ye ran over to learn as well. As for Meng Rang, he could not bring himself to lose face, and he had only mentioned my move to keep No Guga from pestering him. The forms of the withered wind leg were sharp, and even holding back I left the three youngsters amazed. An hour later, just as I was inventing an excuse to slip away, a voice called across the valley for its little Anne to come. I turned and saw Zhang Hyundan at his window, beckoning. It was time. I went to his pavilion while the three kept drilling, thinking nothing of it, stepped inside, shut the door and bowed. He sat in meditation before the pill furnace and pointed to the far side of it, telling me to sit. I settled cross-legged where he indicated and arranged my words in my head. You sought out Cho Gyongpung, he said, and the first sentence cut clean through my planning. I dropped the act and admitted it. Cho Gyongpung had come to me earlier, I said, and told me to reach him at once if I found any clue about the greedy demon. Zhang Chunchu had recommended me to tend the cave of an outer sect disciple named Jumoya. When Jumoya returned and I went to hand it over, I had seen the greedy demon he kept hidden behind the vines. The cave sat too near us, so I had no choice but to find Cho Gyongpung. The old man nodded and said I had done right, that only Cho Gyongpung could handle such a thing. He was no simple man, gifted and highly born both, which was how he had made intersect disciple while still at Foundation establishment. A big background, I thought. No wonder he dared hunt the greedy demon. I felt myself relax, having fear that if he failed, the great cultivator behind the demon would trace the trail back to me. Cho Gyongpung had been chasing the greedy demon all along. The old man went on, which was why he had taken our valley's mission. The whole affair was a wager between his father and some power in the sect, but he was still puzzled. He said, fixing me with a stare, I had come back from Jumoya's place months ago, so why had I only found Cho Gyongpung recently? I answered helplessly that he knew me, that I feared trouble and shrank from conflict, that no matter how Meng Rang ordered me about, I was too lazy to argue. So I had meant at first to pretend I had seen nothing. I told him, but once he brought my junior brother and sister into the valley, I had to reach out to Cho Gyongpung. The words were sincere, and that had truly been my reason. He looked at me a long moment, glanced at the pill furnace, and said I had done very well. From now on I was his true disciple, he said, and he would teach me everything he knew. As for this matter, master and disciple would both let it go, since neither Chogyongpung's father nor the power behind the greedy demon was anyone we could afford to offend. I sat stunned, and looking at the old man's profile I felt I had misjudged him. "Master," I said, and stood to bow solemn. He turned back to me with a kind expression wholly unlike his usual self. "In future," he said, "if there was anything I wished to understand or learn, I could come to him and never feel I was a bother." He had few years of lifespan left, he said, and not many days remained to teach me. His eyes and voice had never been so gentle. I sat and asked, careful, whether he could refine youth-preserving pills. Every cultivation protagonist, after all, took one at the start to stay forever young, and I had no wish to end up a white-haired old man. He shook his head and laughed, then beckoned from afar, and a jade bottle flew into his hand. He poured one out and passed it to me, and I swallowed it without a second's pause. My boldness came from the fact that both my arts carried detoxifying power, so that calling me proof against all poisons was scarcely an exaggeration. Seeing me take it with no guard against him at all, a look of quiet satisfaction crossed his eyes. The pill left me feeling nothing in particular, like a lump of rock candy melting on the tongue. "Any thoughts on alchemy?" he asked. My eyes lit and I nodded fast, admitting I had long wanted to learn it from him, but had been too shy to ask. He pinched his beard and laughed heartily, and the room turned warm. He began teaching alchemy from the very first step, how to light the fire in the pill furnace. Having learned the fire control art, I picked it up so quickly that he mistook me for a natural. Later, when his lessons moved off fire, I began to lose the thread, which left him quiet for a time. Once we became true master and disciple, the valley grew livelier still. The old man, shut in his room for years, started coming out to move about and to guide us in tending the herbs. Noguga and Yeran warned to him more and more, forever praising him as kind and approachable, which only made Mangrang scoff. After that night's great battle, there was no more fighting beyond the valley. Neither Chogyongpum nor Jomoya came near us, and I dared not go poking after the truth, so I buried the matter deep in my heart. Time flew, and a year slid by. I crossed into my 20th year, and my lifespan rose again past 2,800. At noon, one day I lay on a cliff halfway up the mountain with a book. The valley spread below me where I could watch Sochion and Noguga spar with their legwork. Since the word alchemy had surfaced on my panel, I no longer pestered the old man, since learning the craft in truth was simply too dull. It bears mention that at my suggestion, the old man exchanged for more seeds from the outer sect, and once we were true master and disciple, he proved very capable. I lay with my head on one hand and the book in the other, breathing out a thread of chi to turn the pages, when my eyes went wide and I sat up. The latest issue of the Travels of the Azure Wanderer had illustrations. Now this was something. I studied the pictures with great care, criticizing without pause, until a screech fell out of the sky and jerked my head up, my eyes sharpening. A white eagle with a wingspan of some 10 feet came down, and when it was still a good way off, it loosed its claws, and a letter dropped. I caught it clean. The eagle drew a perfect arc through the air and vanished over the far side of the mountain. What a handsome bird. I could not help thinking of my white spirit rat, palm-sized and utterly useless. Inside the envelope, besides the letter, lay a jade token carved with the Cho family mark. I tucked it into my waistband, slid the book into my robes, and read. The letter came from Cho Gyungpung. He first sketched the earlier battle, saying Jumoya had already fallen to his blade. Over the past year, he had gathered evidence everywhere and brought down the great cultivator who had worked the greedy demon, and he told me to trouble my heart over the matter no longer. That jade was a token of the Cho family, he wrote, and if ever I met a problem I could not solve, I could use it to find him or his kin. The Cho family honored the jade, not the face. One jade for one promise. My regard for him climbed sharply. I had not expected so proud an inner sect disciple to prove this loyal and righteous. Even had he never repaid me at all, I could have done nothing about it, having told him myself there was no need to reach out again. When I finished, I tore the letter to shreds and scattered them, then twisted my toe, and the spiritual energy under my foot shivered and ground the scraps to powder. Such was the strength of the 8th level of chi refining. I curled my lips into a smile, sprang up, and flew off like a settling goose, my toes brushing the leaves along the hillside as I came down light the whole way. Noguga and Sochion were long used to the sight. I kept my aura arraigned to the 2nd level of chi refining, but I had let the withered wind leg show openly some time ago, earning the old man's praise. Now I looked every inch a martial expert. I moved low-key, yet I felt I could not hide forever, and revealing a proper share of my strength would help me farm in peace. The moment I landed, the white spirit rat scurried up my leg to my shoulder. I told the 2 boys I had not tested their legwork in days, and called them both to come at me together. So Chan and Noguga traded a glance and rushed me at once. The 3 of us fought with our legs on the grass beyond the garden, our figures weaving, long legs snapping like whips, until the wind whistled and cut grass flew everywhere. I took the 2 of them alone, unpicking their kicks with a single leg. So Cheon's legwork was decent but a touch clumsy, while No Guga had real talent, his kicks already carrying the flavor of the withered wind leg, though every move came a beat slower than mine. Half a cup of tea later, the two were panting, and they looked at each other and yielded at the same moment. I drew my hanging leg back slowly and smiled, telling them they had made great strides and given their senior brother a hard time, and that before long they would surely surpass me. How long was not long? So Cheon asked stiffly. I patted the dust from my trousers and said that depended on how hard they worked. The white spirit rat lay on my shoulder, squeaking away, as though it were laughing along with us. After brushing off Socheon and No Guga with a few words, I headed for my courtyard, drawing the travels of the Azure Wanderer from my robes to savor its illustrations. Just as I reached the gate, Ye-Ran came out to meet me and declared that she wanted to learn the withered wind leg too. I closed the book easily and asked, smiling, whether her senior brother Mang had refused to teach her a spell. That set her off. She complained that he had taught her in the most careless way. When she pressed him, she said he had snapped that he was busy preparing for the outer sect examination and told her to get lost. Her cheeks puffed out like a ball, and I found it funny, though I kept the laugh down. Since senior brother Mang was busy, I told her gently she should not pester him, and I would teach her the withered wind leg myself, at noon the next day. Why the next day, she asked, surprised. Her senior brother was tired, I said, and she should be understanding since her two other senior brothers had just worn me out. I pointed off towards Socheon and No Guga in the distance, then stepped past her and went to my room. Ye-Ran eyed the book in my hand and wondered to herself whether it was really so good. I shut the door, lay on the bed, and picked the book up again. What I liked about it was that it ran in a series, a new volume every half year. Following a serial in the Cultivation world gave me a strange feeling of being back on Earth. I was soon lost in it. I suspected the author was a cultivator of the Taehan sect, though I could not guess his level, and it was a pity the book never described real combat, only sightseeing and romance. Half an hour later, a noise came from the room next door. Mang Rang seemed to be rolling on the floor, his breathing wildly uneven. Had he botched his cultivation? I hesitated over whether to check on him, but he soon went quiet, never once crying out, and as the surrounding spiritual chi began flowing toward his room, I understood he had simply resumed cultivating. Li Ya had already risen in the world, so perhaps Mang Rang carried his own opportunity as well. The three of us had entered the valley on the same day, under the same master, all with our own strange fortunes, and put that way it held a faint legendary flavor. Then I reconsidered and decided I was overthinking. It would be enough if the fool simply died of old age. To my mind, given his temper, Mang Rang would not last long once he left the valley. He did not know how to speak to people and flew into agitation at nothing, hardly the picture of a cultivator. I put it out of mind and went back to my book. I drew in chi for 6 hours a day, using my sleeping time to cultivate, since a cultivator needed no sleep, and drawing chi rested the body better than sleep ever could. The rest of my hours were not all travel tales. Zhong Hyundan had passed me the records of 100 herbs, a work the sect had compiled on the world's spiritual plants, and he had even annotated the medicinal properties in his own hand. His cultivation was poor, but 100 years of living had made him truly learned, which was the one gift of a weak talent, the time to fill oneself with knowledge. Another winter's snow came down, and thick white buried the gardens while I directed my junior brothers and sister to clear it. Mang Rang had grown obsessed by now, shut in his room to cultivate all day beyond my orders, and Zhang Hyundan only told me to let him be. Heat talismans ringed each garden plot, but they ran out in time, and once they did, an hour of snowfall would smother every bed. Watching the three of them work, my thoughts drifted. I was growing less and less satisfied with the valley's yield, and I meant to open new ground. Once this winter passed, I would send them up the slopes to fell trees and till the soil. A whistle of parted air came from far off, and I turned to see a plain-robed man riding a flying sword down through the drifting snow like some immortal swordsman. Duya. I threw a probe on him out of habit and found his cultivation already at the 6th level of the chi refining realm. A quick rise. His arrival drew the eyes of Socheon and the others. He flew to the air near me, sprang down, and with a raised hand recalled his sword into the scabbard at his hip. The light of the blade flashed across the white world, the whole motion smooth and dashing. Socheon and the others stared. They had not joined the sect to do chores. They wanted to cultivate, and only their plain roots had landed them here, waiting on an opportunity. Duya looked me over, clapped both my shoulders, and laughed that I had truly grown up, that I was no longer the little brat who trailed at his heels. I traded pleasantries with him while cursing inside. We were both servants, so what were the heirs for? After circling the point a while, he lowered his voice and asked how the spiritual plants were coming. "Come with me and fetch them," I said with a nod. I had indeed saved some, the head disciple's rightful share, and I meant to hand him all of it. My gift could steal lifespan, But it took time, and until I was truly untouchable I had to keep the G clan close, since they might prove useful later. However strong the Cho family was, their power stopped at the edge of the sect. The G clan was another matter, a top-tier noble house of the whole Taecheng dynasty. The branch I had lived with was only one city's offshoot, yet G clan members turned up in every cultivation school in the land. On the way, Du Ya fell to talking about the outer sect. Li Ya was from my valley, was he not? He said, and the man had grown quite prominent. He was a member of the Taecheng imperial house, now locked in a struggle with an imperial brother, the two of them having even set a date for a duel to the death. Rumor said Li Ya had been a good-for-nothing a few years back, that some opportunity had leapt to the second level of the Foundation establishment realm. That caught my interest. Why did Li Ya sound like the bitter, vengeance-driven hero of some fantasy serial? I asked, curious whether one had to reach Foundation establishment to become an outer sect disciple. Naturally, Du Ya said. His own cultivation fell short, so although he lived in the outer sect city, he still counted as a servant, which was how he brushed up against such news. Reaching Foundation establishment earned a direct rise to outer sect disciple, he explained, and reaching core formation a rise to inner sect, and above the inner sect stood the master inherited disciples and the true disciples. Those were the plain rules, though exceptional talent could break them. Our third young miss was just such a talent, he went on, a master inherited disciple the moment she entered, and already eyeing the seat of true disciple. Cultivation alone would not win it. One had to sway the crowd and hold real prestige, so it fell to them to lay her road. Once he touched on Ji Hyowu, he turned long-winded, and for the first time I did not find him tiresome and listened closely. We stepped into my room, and I drew out the bundle I had readied long ago while he talked. When he finally stopped, he lifted it and asked, "Put out, why there was only this much?" There was plenty of time, I laughed. Cultivation was not the work of a year or two. Rather than overreach for more and get demoted out of the valley, better to let me sit here in peace and supply spiritual plants year-round, keeping not a single one for myself. His face softened, and he asked whether I truly meant it. Truly, I said with a nod. With my talent, what did I need spiritual plants for? Living out my days in quiet was my whole ambition. He opened his mouth, then sighed, reached into the storage pouch at his waist, drew out a secret manual, and handed it to me. The cover read 8 direction steps, and it surprised me. Had the man had a change of heart? This was the G clan's footwork, Du Ya explained. Only the base of their signature Kirin step. But if I learned it and moved faster, I might slip a disaster one day. And this footwork cared nothing for root aptitude, since anyone who put in the hours could master it. I looked at him with fresh eyes and started to speak, but he scooped up the bundle, clapped my shoulder again, and walked past me. I turned and saw him out. In the courtyard, he glanced back and said that we two had grown up together. Even if our choices carried us apart in time, the friendship would remain, he said. And if things ever went badly for me, I could come to him. Then his hand struck the scabbard, the blade rang free, and he leapt up and flew off on it. Such a splendid sword-riding art. I lowered my eyes to the manual and smiled. I began paging through the 8 direction steps and practicing it right there in the courtyard. A G clan skill. I wondered whether spending lifespan to evolve it might let me deduce the clan's true art. Once So Cheon and the others finished the gardens, they hurried over, watching me work the footwork with wide eyes, and Ye Ran asked what technique I was practicing. I moved my feet and asked, smiling, whether they wanted to learn it, and all 3 cried out yes at once. I told them to wait until I had learned it. Then I would teach them. The next room's door slammed open, and Meng Rang walked out with bloodshot eyes, blood-red veins standing on his forehead, his whole face a horror. So Cheon, No Guga, and Ye Ran froze in fright. He came straight at Ye Ran, the nearest of them, like a maddened beast, his aura fierce and vicious, and she was too stunned to move. In less than a breath, he would have been on her. I hooked Ye Ran's shoulder and pulled her back while my right foot came down on Meng Rang's chest. His aura burst, chi wrapping his body, and my kick drove him back until his heels tore 2 long furrows in the ground. I straightened my legs slowly and forced him to retreat. So Cheon and the others stared, my stance burning itself into their eyes. Was their senior brother truly this strong? I always won when we sparred, but that was without spiritual power, and both boys still believed they would pass me one day. Meng Rang seized my foot in both hands with a brutal strength, trying to snap it. I sprang up and stamped down hard, pressing him to his knees with a heavy thud. His knees sank into the mud while he shook all over, unable to shift my foot at all, a wretched sight. The 3 of them were beside themselves with excitement to see me pin him with a single kick. Meng Rang forever bragged of being the strongest in the valley, and now a single kick from their senior brother had driven him to the dirt. No wonder the master had put me in charge and not him. The old man had a discerning eye. I looked down at him and asked whether he had not woken yet, then sent my spiritual power down through my leg into his body to smooth out the chaos churning inside him. His breathing steadied, the red drained from his eyes, and the savagery eased from his face. Seeing him back to himself, I drew my leg away and helped him up. He came to with a start, looked up at me, and gasped for air, asking with difficulty what had just happened. His chi and blood still heaving. It looked like chi deviation. I told him his eyes went wide and he asked whether he had hurt any of us. So Cheon and No Guga went strange in the face, and Ye Ran nearly answered, but I cut in and said it was fine, that he had reined himself in at the crucial moment. He let out a breath and forced a smile, saying that of course he had, that he was the true senior brother and could never harm them. Ye Ran looked at me, her eyes full of admiration, thinking her senior brother both strong and gentle. The two boys thought the same and quietly despised Mang Rang, since talk was cheap and he had looked like a ghost a moment ago. I sent the three off and walked Mang Rang back to his room. What technique was he practicing? I asked, since it was far too sinister. My view of him was low, but we had lived side by side for years, and I still hoped he would come through unharmed. A divine technique, he said with a laugh. Only his talent and comprehension fell short, so it was easy to practice it wrong. Yet he had no choice since he had to become an outer sect disciple. Why must he, I asked, puzzled, when he had claimed before not to care? His face darkened at once and he fell silent, and seeing he did not wish to speak, I let it drop, settled him on the bed, and left. To me the whole thing was a small interlude. I could not steer another man's fate, and everyone chased his own end. If a man died on the road to immortality, it was no great loss. Back in the courtyard, I went on practicing the 8 direction steps. Winter passed and spring returned in all its color. In the early morning, with ice and snow still lingering in the valley, I led my junior brothers and sister up the mountain. Felling trees and pulling roots was a kind of cultivation too, I told them. They could do it on their own spiritual power and cultivate again once it ran dry, which would lift their level. In green robes, I stood in the forest and smiled softly, hands behind my back, every inch the expert. Subduing the deviation struck Mang Rang with one kick had planted that expert's image firmly in their hearts. I even sensed Ye Ran developing other notions about me, growing clingy, though I steered her back to her cultivation in time. How could one speak of love while chasing immortality? In this life I had no wish to fall early into the whirlpool of feeling which only led a man astray. So Cheon turned back and asked whether they should use their hands or their legs. Whatever was convenient, I said, still smiling, since cultivation was one thing and finishing the task another, and they only had to find the right direction. Was this how Jiang Chunchu had once felt? Spouting grand nonsense was strangely refreshing. No Guga rubbed his hands and challenged So Cheon to a race. So Cheon agreed at once, and Ye Ran clamored to join, though the two boys ignored her, disliking a contest with a girl. I watched them tear up trees while I planned the new plot. What herbs should go on this slope? I sank into thought. Though the three were cultivators, their levels ran low, and it took them half a day to clear a patch of open ground. Into that ground I set the seeds of a third-tier herb, the soul-shaking grass. With that done, the senior brothers walked back down together, talking and laughing. Our shadows stretched long on the hillside in the setting sun. I asked the three about their goals, and all of them wanted the outer sect, though for different reasons. So Cheon simply wished to grow strong. No Guga wanted to prove himself to his family, and Ye Ran seemed to carry some secret she would only hint at. I listened with real interest, since everyone deserved a story of their own, and hearing other people's lives made my own feel fuller. A month after the soul-shaking grass went in, on a night of bright moon and thin stars, I sat cross-legged on my bed and studied my panel, lost in thought. My lifespan read 20 years lived against 3,163. My root now stood at a first-class wood root, with the other 4 elements better than before. My cultivation at the 9th level of the Qi refining realm. My techniques were the divine wood pure yang art and the dragon force primordial art, both consummate, my alchemy still a beginner's. My ultimate arts were the mastered whirlwind shadowless kick, beside the unlearned Li family 7 swords and 8 direction steps. Should I spend lifespan to force a breakthrough? Zheng Hyundan could refine foundation establishment pills and had been kind to me of late, so perhaps I could ask for one. Yet Mang Rang's ruin left me wary of the old man. Mang Rang had no grand backing. Had he held a divine technique, he would have practiced it long ago, so why begin only after Li Ya and Jiang Chunchu left? With my senses I could be sure he had met no strangers in 2 years, at most being called in by Zheng Hyundan, and I did not eavesdrop on every talk between them. Forget it. Better to lean on myself than on anyone else, and stay safe. The road to immortality was treacherous, and a single misstep meant utter ruin. I fed 1 year of lifespan into my cultivation. A note surfaced warning that cultivation was a real thing, that turning the virtual into the true would cost more than the lifespan spent in ordinary practice. A year of chi absorption followed, and lacking both a foundation establishment pill and any opportunity, I failed to break through. I kept my calm and invested year by year. Failure, failure, failure. After a full 9 tries, my face would no longer hold still. Fine, I would not believe it, and I poured in 100 years at once. The lines came fast this time. 10 years of absorption drove the divine wood pure yang art against the barrier and failed, and 20 forced it through at last. 30 carried me to the second level of foundation establishment, 50 to the third, 70 to the fourth, and 100 to the fifth. Before joy could take me, I felt the danger. Breaking so many levels at once, how vast would the commotion be? The thought had barely formed when my body began to heat, and the divine wood pure yang art turned on its own, so I scrambled up and vaulted out the open window. My steps were swift and silent, and within 3 breaths I was into the forest. I kicked off the cliff like an ape and climbed fast to the peak, while the heaven and earth spiritual chi was already rushing at me. I dropped into the dim woods, caught a branch with one foot, sprang off it and landed light after a few bounds. The chi poured into me in a frenzy, spinning a vortex around my body, its speed climbing until it frightened me. Luckily, I had reacted quickly. Had I truly broken through inside the valley, I would have roused the others. Zhong Hyundan and Meng Rang might not dare come out, but So Qian and No Guga, those 2 blockheads, certainly would. I ran on as fast as a spirit fox, the forest hissing and swaying around me in the dark. The whirlwind shadowless kick carried me at a blistering pace, over ridge after ridge, farther and farther from the valley. Before I could stop, my realm began to climb again, the spiritual chi slamming through my meridians while my core transformed. It hurt. I frowned but did not slow. After a wild run of more than 10 miles, I finally halted in a wood, sat under a tree, and circulated my chi, sighing to myself as I did. To think 100 years of lifespan could carry me from the 9th level of chi refining to the 5th of foundation establishment. The stolen lifespan was plainly genuine, though the true engine of it was the consummate divine wood pure yang art. If I spent 1,000 years, I wondered, could I reach the golden core realm in one breath? Or brush the nascent soul? I sank into endless imagining. The chi I drew in grew richer and richer, and the whole wood seemed caught in the gale, shaking hard, leaves flying everywhere, so that in the dark they looked like fanged and clawing demons. The commotion was a touch excessive. I complained inside. The flaw of evolving cultivation with lifespan had shown itself plainly, since the uproar drew trouble. Evolution did not conjure cultivation from nothing. It crushed all the spiritual chi a breakthrough needed into a single span of time, to force a rapid rise. If a leap from the 9th of chi refining to the 5th of foundation establishment made this much noise, then breaking from golden core into nascent soul would shake the earth. If it drew other cultivators mid-breakthrough, that would be bad. I always reckoned for the worst. No, I had to be far more careful in future. From now on, I would spend a single year of lifespan a day and climb step by step. Time slid by. Under the night sky, a hard wind blew, my robes snapping, my spiritual power swelling fast, and then my aura shifted all at once. Foundation establishment achieved. My core changed, spinning power faster and driving my muscles and bones to strengthen, and it was not done. My cultivation kept rising, dust and torn grass wheeling around me with great force. Through the 2nd level, the 3rd, the 4th. I took no joy in the swift breakthrough. A taut string stayed drawn in my heart, for fear someone would come. The sect was vast, and one rarely saw a soul within 100 miles of the valley, so surely I had not disturbed any great cultivator. As I thought it, I felt 2 powerful auras closing from afar, stronger even than Cho Gyongpeng had been. What I feared had come to pass. I was still climbing from the 4th level toward the 5th, and could not simply rise and run, and even fleeing now I would struggle to shake them. Big trouble. I felt the 2 auras draw near, and when the gap closed to under a few hundred feet they stopped, a peak between us. I stood in the dim wood in a dark green robe, dust whirling, my true face hard to make out, and when they did not force their way over I let out a breath. They were wary of me too, it seemed, and would not risk disturbing me rashly. My cultivation kept growing, and with the uproar around me and the mountain between us, I could not catch their talk, which left me unable to relax. By the time I reached the 5th level of foundation establishment, the 2 beyond the peak still had not moved. My rise began to slow. I pressed my right hand to the trunk behind me and ran my inner chi into the wood, and a line of cyan light spread across the bark and circled my palm. When the light met head to tail, I pulled my hand back and tore a wooden mask straight off the trunk. I fitted it to my face, drew 2 eyes on it with a fingertip so the marked wood fell away, and wore a finished mask. The chi was still boring into me, but I could stand now. Feeling the heaven and earth chi begin to settle, a loud voice carried over asking, which fellow Taoist was breaking through here, and why not in his own immortal cave? The tone was grave, plainly suspecting I was no disciple of the sect. I weighed whether to answer. I was only a utility disciple, and to be found reaching foundation establishment within a few years of joining carried risk even if it won me an outer sect place. The night's uproar had been too great. If those 2 learned my name, a 3rd and a 4th would follow, and what if one meant me harm? It was no wonder I overthought. having seen enough of human cruelty as a servant. While I bound the mask with grass vine, I turned it over, my eyes flashing cold in the dark. No, I could not be exposed. Even an outer sect place was no gift to me, since the sect raised no disciple for free, and every outer sect disciple took missions that led sooner or later into deadly danger. Once my cultivation had steadied, I stood, my face hidden but for the eyes, a vortex of chi still turning around me. Just then, I felt the two auras rushing down the peak, plainly taking me now for an intruder. I had dared stay silent only because I judged their cultivation was not truly high. Had they felt beyond my resistance, I would not have gambled. I turned and ran into the deep forest. A tearing of air came behind me, and I looked back to see a cold light streaking through the dark, snapping branches as it flew. A woman behind it. She wore white, her right arm outstretched, palm toward the hilt, the blade joined to her by a thread of chi and loosing sharp sword energy. Unstoppable, like a startled swan flashing through the trees. In an instant, her sword was a few feet from my back. My left foot landed, my body tipped back, my left leg folded under me, and the blade slid past just overhead. The woman in white went wide-eyed, the night sinking her face into shadow but for a pair of bright, stunned eyes. No sooner had she come than I answered. As I dropped, my right leg kicked back into her belly. A force she had never met drove into her, blanking her mind on the instant, so that she coughed up a mouthful of blood. She flew backward, felled a great tree, and dropped into the grass. Whether alive or dead I could not say. A furious shout came, and I saw a cyan figure rushing in fast, trailing after images. So fast. My eyes could not track his movement, and in my alarm I loosed the whirlwind shadowless kick outright. I had no real combat behind me. The greedy demon had died to a single slap, so against a strong foe I dared not close at all. Spiritual chi flooded my right leg. I stepped back and I kicked out hard. A gale rose from the ground and howled toward the cyan figure, a sword-holding man whose pupils blew wide, filled with the shadows of my legs. Dust flew, whole rows of trees went down, and waves of leg shadows swallowed him with the force of snapping dry reeds and crushing rotten wood. Sweeping over 100 feet with terrible momentum, I drew my leg back and turned into the dark. The forest slowly stilled, and when the dust cleared, the swordsman lay on the ground, unmoving. In the early morning, Ye Ran came out of her house, her eyes going by habit to the senior brother's courtyard, and over the low wall she saw our figures. They really were diligent, she thought, and she could not let them leave her behind, so she hurried over. She came to my side and greeted me obediently as her eldest senior brother, and I nodded and smiled. Was I doing labor today? She asked, since I had changed into the cloth clothes I wore only for picking herbs. Yes, I said. I planned to go up the mountain in the afternoon. She thought nothing of it and went on. The wind the night before had frightened her off cultivating, she said, for fear the chaotic chi would spoil her luck mid-absorption. She had heard from senior brother Mang that I had once met a demon attack and wondered what it had been like. Watching So Chian and No Guga drill the withered wind leg, I laid the old scene out for her, patient as ever, no matter the listener. Half an hour later, the juniors drifted off one by one, and my own idle time arrived. I lay under a tree with the book in one hand and the white spirit rat in the other, very comfortable, my mind circling back to the two I had met the night before. I had held my strength back, so surely I had not killed them. It left me uneasy since I bore them no grudge, and without a grudge I did not care to kill. Carrying that worry, I passed a somewhat wretched day. Sunset and rose, and by the next noon, reading at the wooden fence, I caught figures at the mouth of the valley, more than one. A man and a woman. I let out a quiet breath, glad they were not dead. I used the Dragon Force primordial art to press my cultivation down to the 3rd level of chi refining, unafraid of being known. Soon Jung Hyundan came out of his pavilion, crossed quickly to the two, and cupped his fists in greeting before a woman in white and a man in blue. The woman had a cold, stunning face, her skin fair as set cream, apricot eyes under willow brows, her right hand on her scabbard, a proud chill about her that warned strangers off. The man in blue was handsome too, upright in bearing and dressed in gorgeous brocade, though his face held a pallor. Both were outer sect disciples, the man named Shi Young and the woman named Lee Haonu. Shi Yang smiled and stated their business, and Jung Hyundan answered that no one else had come to his valley these past 2 days, calm from 100 years of seeing everything. Shi Yang looked over the valley and asked whether he could gather the disciples. The old man had no objection, turned, gathered Chi into his core, and called out, and we all came running. He told Sochian to drag senior brother Mang out as well, and Sochian turned and ran off to fetch him. Shi Yang and Lee Hyunyu began sizing up the three of us, both brows furrowed, saying nothing, while the old man waited in silence for Mang Rang. I took the chance to check the pair's lifespans, having had no time the night before. Li Hyunyu stood at the 4th level of Foundation Establishment, 24 years old, a span of 245 against a ceiling of 1,670. Shi Yang stood at the 5th level, 25, a span of 298 against a ceiling of 1,304. Good heavens. Both were geniuses, at Foundation Establishment in their 20s with ceilings past 1,000 years, and Li Hyunyu's ran even higher than Li Ya's, both surnamed Li. Could this woman be of the royal house too? I was quietly shaken and grateful I had kept my face hidden the night before. Before long, So Cheon brought a visibly irritated Mang Rang over. Seeing Mang Rang, Shi Yang narrowed his eyes and sent a silent word to Li Hyunyu. This boy's chi ran chaotic with signs of chi deviation, he said, and low as his cultivation was, he might yet be tied to the one they hunted. Li Hyunyu stared at Mang Rang as though to see clean through him. Feeling their eyes and marking their extraordinary dress, Mang Rang reined himself in at once, lowered his head, and came to stand beside me with So-chan close behind. The old man asked whether they had seen anyone these past days, since 2 nights back a mysterious cultivator had broken through more than 10 miles out, suspected of being a demonic path spy. Good heavens, a demonic path spy now too, I groaned inside, while on my face I frowned and looked afraid. Mang Rang's eyes went wide and he blurted out a fear of another demon invasion. Another, Shi Yang said, fixing him with a stare. What did he mean? Unable to hold his tongue, Mang Rang spilled the whole tale of the greedy demon, and when Shi Yang heard it had touched an intersect disciple, his expression shifted slightly. Was it so dangerous around here? He seemed to think, and suddenly he had less appetite for the hunt. I seized the moment to ask whether the 2 seniors had met this demonic path spy, and whether they could give us any clue. The others nodded, all of them tense at the word. Shi Yang mused that the night had been too dark, and that he only remembered the man's leg technique had been fast. Fast leg techniques, so Cheon, Noguga, and Ye Ran all stirred thinking of me at once, though they kept their eyes off me and only muttered to themselves. Mang Rang asked what he meant, whether the 2 of them had not beaten this demonic path spy. Shi Yang's face soured on the spot. He drew a breath and admitted their skill had come up short. His own cultivation was the 5th level of Foundation Establishment, his cousin's the 4th, and the cultivator who had beaten them so easily was of unfathomable depth. If we held any clue, he warned, we should speak soon, to keep the trouble from reaching us. When he named their levels, Mang Rang and the others gasped. Frightened, Mang Rang asked why, if they were no match they still dared hunt the man, and why they did not simply beg the inner sect for help. They had their own plans, Shi Yang said, growing more and more sick of him, since the brat's words struck straight at a sore spot. I took the chance to add that if the man were truly a demonic path spy, 2 seniors would not have been let off so lightly. Their injuries did not look severe, I said, and would a demonic path cultivator be so soft-hearted? Shi Yang gave me a subtle look and, after a moment, allowed that it was hard to say for now. But neither outer nor inner sect disciples broke through outside their own caves, he said, so something was surely amiss, and did we truly have nothing? Li Hyunyu measured me while I feigned nerves and dared not meet their eyes. My disciples truly have not seen your spy, Jung Hyundan said, breaking the taut air. Shi Yang meant to press on, but Li Hyunyu spoke first, saying that in that case they would take their leave, and she bowed to the old man and turned to go. Shi Yang could only follow, throwing Mang Rang a glare as he left. So Cheon turned to me as if to speak, but Ye Ran stopped him with a finger to her lips and a flurry of winks. The old man said no more, and walked back toward his pavilion. Once the 2 had cleared the valley, I started for my courtyard, the others trailing me, so Cheon plainly holding something back. What was it? I asked, smiling. Did he think his senior brother's legwork strong enough to beat 2 Foundation Establishment cultivators? His face went red and he scratched his head. Mang Rang burst out laughing and said, irritable, that their senior brother was only at the 3rd level of chi refining. The withered wind leg was one of the commonest arts in the outer sect, he said. So how could I be the spy those disciples feared? No, Guga nodded, having never once taken me for a demonic path spy, since in his eyes, his senior brother was the gentlest, kindest man he had ever known. Ye Ran, put out, said that even the commonest leg art would one day grow fearsome in her senior brother's hands. The day I pinned Mang Rang with a single kick had never reached his ears, on my own instruction, and neither my junior brothers nor sister had let it slip. He shook his head, laughed, and went off alone to practice spells in the forest, while Ye Ran shook a small fist at his back, both cheeks puffed like buns. Fine, I told them. Everyone go cultivate and strive to reach the outer sect soon, and I waved them off. High above the mountains, meanwhile, Shi Yang and Li Hyunyu flew side by side on their swords, unhurried, their eyes raking the land below. He always felt that valley was a touch strange, Shi Yang said, a coldness in his eyes, Meng Rang's ugly face rising in his mind, until the anger climbed again. Li Hunyu's face stayed cold as she said softly, that she thought the utility disciple had been right. Perhaps their opponent was no demonic path spy at all, only someone who did not wish to be known, and the plain fact that they both still lived was the best proof. Shi Yang frowned and asked whether such a man could exist in the outer sect. He judged the opponent to hold at least the 9th level of Foundation establishment, and that the leg art was unlike anything he had seen, surely some ultimate technique, its bearer of great origins. They would know in time, Li Hyunyu said, gazing at the far horizon, her fine brows drawn tight. Shi Yang fell silent too. Both were famed geniuses of the outer sect, and the thought that the previous night's opponent might be an outer sect disciple as well struck him as a heavy blow. Summer came on, brutal at the Taehan sect, the whole world seeming to warp in the heat, no Guga steaming as he tilled the soil. At 21 I sat practicing alchemy in the courtyard, a small cauldron before me, staring at the boiling brew, torn over whether to drop the herb in my hand. Alchemy was truly a craftsman's work. Just then Meng Rang came racing into the courtyard, bolted into his room, and came out in under 10 breaths with a bundle. He was off to sit the outer sect assessment, he told me, and once he had made a name he would come back to look after me, and with that he left in high excitement. The assessment? I was surprised. He was only at the 7th level of chi refining, so how could he sit it? Anyone who could not show rare talent on entering the sect could only reach the outer sect after breaking into Foundation establishment. This was the Taehan sect, first of the whole dynasty, where a Foundation establishment cultivator revered in some third-rate sect could be no more than an outer sect disciple. I looked after him and saw Jung Hyundan coming down the stairs, meaning to take Meng Rang out of the valley himself. Something felt off, but even had I tried to stop him, Meng Rang would not have listened. Gone half mad for the sake of an outer sect rank. Why bother, I thought, my eyes hardening. I was chasing the road to long life, and if I policed this and that, I would never know peace. So, I went on with my alchemy, trying to keep Meng Rang out of mind, and for my trouble I sat before the little cauldron a whole day and refined a heap of dregs. I waited for deep night, then slipped out, not for Meng Rang but for my own cultivation. 2 months had passed since Shi Yang and Li Hyunyu left, and I was ready to begin my daily plan. From now on, every late night, I would steal out and feed 1 year of lifespan into my cultivation. This too raised some stir, but far less than before, and it passed quickly. The next day I asked Ye Ran how her cultivation had gone, and this time she had heard no noise and cultivated smoothly, which set me fully at ease. The daily plan could go ahead. Days slid by. Zhang Hyundan and Meng Rang had been gone half a month without return, and I could be sure Meng Rang was in grave danger. When Zhang Chunchu once went to the outer sect, he came back within 7 days at most and never lingered this long. So Qian and the others asked when their master would return, and I could only turn their minds back to their cultivation. 2 months on, Zhang Hyundan finally came back, his hair gone white, his cloth cap gone, his look a shock to the juniors, who crowded around him as I did. The master was fine, he said weakly, waving a hand, only in need of a few days' rest, and he eased Noguga gently aside and walked toward his pavilion. I frowned hard. I could see his cultivation had fallen back to the 2nd level of chi refining, and his span had shrunk to a bare 2 years. I had thought he meant to scheme against Meng Rang, to seize his body or refine him into a puppet, yet here he looked a man at death's door. I watched his back and sank into thought. Yi Ran, taking me for worried, comforted me that the master would be all right, and I looked at her and nodded with a smile. After a few words with the juniors, I left alone. Something is wrong with the master, Noguga murmured to Sochan, his brows knit and his eyes sharp, and Sochan agreed that it was indeed wrong. Noguga leaned to his ear and spoke low, while Ye Ran kept her gaze on my back. After his return, Zhang Hyundan kept to his room, and I could feel him working to heal, though his aura thinned by the day. Not until winter neared did he come out at last, calling me over from afar, and I ran to him and bowed. His hair had gone wholly white, his beard and brows with it, brown spots risen on his face, an old man to the bone. "Come," he said, stroking that beard with a very kind smile. He would take me to the outer sect. "What for?" I asked. "Did I not wish to be Valley Master one day?" he answered. My pulse jumped, but my face crumpled into alarm as I begged him not to frighten me, to tell me what had happened to him. My fluster only softened his eyes further. "Come, we would talk on the way," and he turned and walked out of the valley. I gave quick word to Sochion, the nearest, then followed. Beyond the valley he headed into the forest, unable now to ride his sword, so we would have to walk the whole way. I wanted to turn back and tell the 3 of them to leave the ripe herbs for me to harvest. On my return, master and disciple walked on through the trees, and when I moved to support him, he politely refused. The sect gave a valley master only limited pay, he said idly, walking ahead. I would have to weigh my choices carefully when recruiting utility disciples, and I would owe a set harvest each year. I looked to be listening closely, though a guard stayed up in my heart, since Mang Rang's fate was still unknown. His pace was slow, the mountains many, and half an hour brought us only a few miles. My mind churned. How long would it take to reach the outer sect? I half wanted to carry him on my back. We crossed a small stream, and from ahead he suddenly asked why I did not ask after Mang Rang. Feigning confusion, I said he had gone to sit the outer sect assessment and asked whether he had failed it. I lied to him, the old man answered, walking on as though unafraid of a blow from behind. Mang Rang had already been refined into a medicine parasite. My face did not change. I read my surroundings with care and made sure no one else was near. A medicine parasite, I asked, feigning horror. Was the master thinking to do the same to me? Without looking back, Zhang Hyundan pushed aside the branches in his path and ducked through. As he walked, he said that Mang Rang's talent had run a shade better than mine. Only a shade. And that even with his pills, the boy would have struggled to reach Foundation establishment. The valley needed only one heir, he said, and Mang Rang's existence was a threat to me, his character flaws surely plain to my senses. I fell silent. It sounded wrong, as though he had killed Mang Rang for my sake, and I had not wanted the man dead. Despicable as he was, his nature had not been truly evil. Do not overthink it, Zhang Hyundan said idly. He had killed Mang Rang to clear my road, and if blame was owed, it lay with the boy's talent running better than mine, and he was only aiding the master of the valley. I could not help asking why, in choosing that master one would not pick the better talent. Because a formidable talent, he said, could never spend a whole life in peace in this valley. Then did the valley hold something special, I asked. It did. He was not merely a disciple of the Taehyun sect, he told me, but also a spy for the Thousand Autumns Pavilion. That was a sect of the demonic path whose strength fell short of the Taehyun and which had therefore planted many spies like him. Good heavens, a demonic path spy in truth. I did not know how to answer. I saw at last that he truly meant me no harm, and the heart of it was that he plainly meant to pass the spy's burden on to me. After I am gone, he said, simply settle into the Valley Master's seat. I need do nothing on purpose. When the Thousand Autumns Pavilion has need of me, someone will come, and I need only follow their word. I could also report it to the sect, he allowed, since he had little life left. But I should weigh carefully whether the sect would suffer me, since for a utility disciple they would sooner kill an innocent by mistake than let one slip. He even laced the words with a note of comfort, which made me want to strike him. Then he gave me the pavilion's code, that the Thousand Autumns vine held no regret, that its myriad arts withered into silence, their roots hard to find. Did I truly have no other choice, I asked. What did I think? He returned. I fell silent again. Spies like him meant little even to the pavilion, he said with a self-mocking tone, and perhaps in my whole life none would ever come for me. Turning it over, I saw I truly could not refuse. It was like yellow mud smeared on a trouser leg. Whether or not you were a demonic path spy, you were one now. Master, I said. Lo, if he was a cultivator of the Thousand Autumns Pavilion, there had to be a reason he had stayed in this particular valley. So why hide it? Truly sharp, he said. Beneath the valley grew a 7th grade spirit tree, and once we returned he would take me to see it. 7th grade, I echoed, my voice unsteady, my eyes alight. Fine winter snow drifted between heaven and earth. A towering city stood among the ridges, its gate a full 100 feet high, some people walking in, some sect disciples riding swords, a few on mounts. I walked the mountain path and looked on the outer sect city from afar with wonder in my eyes. What a vast place. The Taehyun sect held 8 outer sect cities, the old man told me, and deeper in 4 inner sect cities. Within those stood a single main city, where only prodigies and the highly placed could set foot. Seen from the sky, they said, the sect's layout formed an exquisite compass, every mountain holding its own mysteries. He sighed as he spoke, regret in his eyes. How large was the sect then? I asked. Vast and boundless, he said he did not know either. I had never come to the outer sect city on joining since an elder had received Ji Haowu in a mountain pavilion. On her account, when I named where I wished to go, that elder had sent a disciple to escort me to Zhonghyandan's valley. This was my first time here. We walked to the gate where the old man showed a token, and I caught 2 words engraved on it, Mystic Valley. Inside the gate, a wall of noise crashed over me, and I marveled in secret, for the gate held a restriction, and with all my hearing I had caught nothing of the din from without. Top-grade herbs, a voice cried. First come, first served. Only 10 stalks today. Relics from an Ascent Soul cultivator's cave, called another. Come and see. A Snow Mountain spirit fox of pure bloodline, said a third. Able to speak in 5 more years of raising. Treasure hunting. 10 low-grade spirit stones a draw. Whatever you open rests on your luck. A map of an ancient cultivator's cave, for the strong to buy. The hawking on both sides drew me in, the street wide and lined with pavilions and shops. No disciples squatting at mere stalls. I even saw a brothel. Not bad, I thought, worthy of a righteous sect. The old man pointed things out as we went, and it opened my eyes. No wonder people broke their heads to enter the Taehyung sect, whose cultivation resources ran so rich. I was not only listening, I was working the probe like mad, and 2 miles down the street I had already seen 5 cultivators with ceilings past 500 years. The outer sect truly hid its talents. Half an hour on, the old man brought me into a great mansion, 3 large characters on the plaque above. Alchemy Hall. People came and went inside. Some hurried, some anxious, some laughing heartily. I followed him to a courtyard to pay respects to an elder of the hall. Jo Chung-no, 9th level of Foundation Establishment, one of the hall's elders, oversaw 51 medicine valleys and stood as Jong Hyundan's superior. He was plump, in a loose green robe, a kind and harmless smile on his face. Inside the hall, Ju Chung-no received the old man and had a disciple pour tea. Xuandan, he asked with concern, why was his color so poor? I took the chance to probe. Ju Chung-no stood at the 9th level of Foundation Establishment, 211 years old. A span of 267 against a ceiling of 510. 211 years lived. I kept beside the old man and dared show no disrespect. To speak plainly, Jung Hyundan said with a chuckle, his time was running out. He had come not only to hand in the herbs but for his disciple, wishing to pass the seat of Mystic Valley Master to him. Jo Chung-no looked at me and smiled that I stood at the 3rd level of Qi refining, so the child must have his merits. What a nicely veiled insult. The old man laughed that I had a pure and good nature, that I could unite the disciples, and that I was willing to spend my whole life in the valley, the best of candidates. Ju Chung-no said little more. He raised a hand and beckoned, and a disciple came in from outside. A stick of incense later, I followed Jung Hyundan out of the hall, turning a bronze token in my hand with the 2 words, Mystic Valley, cut into it, the aura of a restriction inside. From now on, within the alchemy hall of the Taehyung sect, I was master of Mystic Valley. The Valley Master's storage pouch was with him. His voice came from ahead, and he would pass it to me. Where were we going next? I asked quickly since a batch of herbs sat ripe and I feared the juniors would harvest it for me. Before we returned, he said without looking back, he would take me to the utility hall to recruit disciples, and today I could take one back with me to learn the way of it. I looked at his back, emotion stirring in me. People held many sides and Jung Hyundan embodied it whole. The old Jung Hyundan had shown his disciples a cold face, and now he had even refined one of his own into a medicine parasite. He was a spy of the demonic path besides, a villain by any measure. Yet the kindness he showed me was real. The utility hall stood a few streets from the alchemy hall, a mansion larger still, and past its gate lay a vast square packed with people. Looking on all those candidates waiting to be chosen, I saw how lucky I had been. But for the G clan, my own route would have left me waiting there among them. Look around on my own, he said softly. He would not interfere, and once I chose he would take me to register, rubbing his chest as some discomfort took him. I nodded and walked off. Did I even need to judge? With my golden finger already activated, I worked the probe like mad, reading everyone I passed. Most here held very low ceilings, and there were short-lived souls among them, some with a single year left and still hoping to be picked. Soon I found a genius with a ceiling past 500, but I was in no hurry, and I would see everyone first. The valley did not need a genius. What I wanted was someone with a long current span. The ceiling was the limit of a life, hard to reach and needing many chances to fill. Current lifespan was another thing, since barring grave injury they would live that long, and root aptitude alone could never fix a person's height, which was why so many pearls lay overlooked. Soon my gaze fixed on a boy, a little monk with an ordinary face and worn cloth, sitting cross-legged in a corner of the square. Oh Shin, 2nd level of Qi refining, 15 years old, a span of 330 against a ceiling of 380. 330 years of current span at the Qi refining realm. Rare. Perhaps the child held a special physique, or cultivated some uncommon art. I went straight to him, and sensing something he opened his eyes to my smiling face. Little brother, I asked gently, was he willing to come to my medicine valley, which stayed quiet enough to leave ample time to cultivate? Seeing my smile, Oshin nodded without quite thinking. Off to the side, Jong Hyundan studied him, seemed to catch something, then glanced at me, his eyes turning strange. From the moment I recruited him, Oshin said not a word until we walked out of the utility hall, and even then he only nodded once. I half suspected I had picked up a mute. To him, becoming a utility disciple as fast as possible was the one thing that mattered, and since my first impression of him was good, I had agreed on the spot. What I did not know then was why he was in such a hurry. He too was a spy of the demonic path. He had come from the Thousand Autumns Pavilion, the youngest son of one of its pavilion masters. Because his talent fell short of his brother's, he had volunteered for this post, partly to flee a stifling home and partly to see whether he might earn some merit. If he could not, so be it. Looking at Zhang Hyanden and me, he had already formed a judgment, a kind and simple ordinary cultivator, and an old man nearly in his grave, and a valley that sounded leisurely and easy. Heavy snow fell, and Mystic Valley sank into a single sheet of white. No Guga's kick sent Ocean sprawling into the drifts, snow splashing his face, and he clutched his chest in pain. Yeran scolded No Guga for being so hard on him. Sparring had to be taken seriously, No Guga said, chin raised, where there was no improvement in it. His cultivation had reached the 5th level of chi refining, the strongest of them on the surface. Yeran stood at the 4th, Sochian and me at the 3rd, and Oshin at the 2nd, helpless before him. A utility disciple this strong, Oshin thought, his composure near collapse. He had watched No Guga drill his legwork and wanted to try, and 2 kicks had dropped him. What he did not know was that No Guga had a good senior brother. For years I had sparred with him daily, and he had never once won, so his legwork had grown fine and his body strong. Oshin would not believe it, blamed his own carelessness, rose and charged again, and 2 more kicks put him back in the snow. His forearm felt near breaking, and at 15 he lay in the drifts shedding tears of shame. This was nothing like the spy's life he had imagined. He had pictured climbing blades and waiting fire, or at worst falling while stealing secrets, not being flattened by a plain-faced utility disciple. No Guga told Yeran to move aside and stop favoring the boy, since Oshin was no weak girl, and asked why she had said nothing when the great master kicked him down. She had spoken up for him then, she snapped, and he had only yelled at her, and besides, the great master never used such force. Did I not wait? She asked, until No Guga had shown every kick before I gently put him down, while he came on reckless and hard, and what could Oshin ever learn from that? His face changed. Thinking it over, it was true, and one-sided beatings taught nothing. Shame filled him, and gratitude toward me deepened.